The world's largest fence spans over 3,100 miles from Queensland to South Australia. If stretched out, it could easily connect London to New York. And if you'd walk next to it, you'd need 6 months to complete the journey. It wasn't built to safeguard the Australian border. Why would it, since Aussies are just surrounded by water? It wasn't meant to protect some important building either. Its purpose is to keep some animal species away from each other. It was back in the late 1800s when Australians started building parts of this fence. They wanted to create a barrier separating the lively, bustling part of the country where cities like Melbourne and Sydney thrive from the harsh, dry outback. They used wooden posts dug deep into the ground, linked up with wire mesh standing about 6 feet tall. Some parts of the fence even have a second electrically charged layer. To make sure this fence did its job, they added some red and white lights to help guard things even at night. A team of over 20 people work full-time to keep things in check here. And every year, local authorities chip in around $750,000 to keep the construction in shape. Why all this trouble? The main reason was dingoes. These gingery, wolf-like creatures are Australia's largest carnivore mammals, and they're also apex predators. They were causing a lot of trouble to local farmers, especially in southern Queensland, where they often go after sheep. For the most part, the fence has been doing its job okay, but it's not foolproof. Some dingoes still manage to sneak through. Other times, wild camels end up crashing into it. That's because Australia has quite a massive camel population roaming around. But this man-made solution did more than locals expected. They thought there would just be fewer dingoes within the fence, but fewer dingoes mean more kangaroos. And more kangaroos mean more competition with the sheep for food. It's not just the bigger species feeling the squeeze. The smaller animals and the greenery also went through changes. With all this competition in a smaller space, locals noticed less diversity in the plant life and small animals. The soil became less nutritious over time, affecting plant growth. Plus, the fence acts as a roadblock for animal migration and seed dispersal. Even the sand dunes are feeling the effects, with less grass cover to hold things together. When scientists looked at kangaroos on both sides of the fence, they noticed that the young pups inside were lighter and tinier on average. The outsiders had bigger feet and heads for their age, and it wasn't because they were eating a different diet. The kangaroos that were stuck sharing the land with dingoes had to bulk up faster to survive. On the flip side, those inside the fence took it slower because they weren't under the same type of pressure. These had to compete with a lot of other creatures for food, so a bigger size wasn't a priority anymore. Researchers are still not sure if this difference is a quick fix or a long-term gene adaptation. What about domesticating dingoes? Wouldn't that help? Many think dingoes were once pets in Australia, but it's not known for sure. These days, they're pretty wild, just like wolves, hyenas, or coyotes. Most of them don't need packs to survive and are solitary hunters with sharp instincts built in. So taming them isn't going to be easy. Still, taking down the construction is not an option for now. Australians are so strict when it comes to making sure dingoes are kept away that they even put laws in place for people who mess up with the fence. Leaving a crossing gate open can put people behind bars for up to 3 months. Damaging the fence can cost people 6 months' worth of their freedom. It wasn't the first time Australians thought a fence could help with animal issues. Before they needed it for dingoes, they experienced a serious bunny invasion. Cute as they are, rabbits were damaging the land used for farming, so locals thought of a 3-part fence. The first one stretched all the way from Ravensthorpe in the south to Pardue Station on the Pilbara coast. It was over 1,100 miles long, making it the longest unbroken fence globally at the time. All these bunny problems could have been traced back to a man named Thomas Austin. Back in 1859, when he first came to the land down under, he thought it would be a good idea to release a few rabbits into the wild, thinking it would add a bit of charm to the place. But since rabbits aren't native to Australia, they didn't have any natural predators at the time. They're also pretty adaptive creatures, needing just some grass for feeding. They reproduce at astonishing speeds too. A mama rabbit can have 4 litters a year, with as many as 5 bunnies each. Pretty soon, their numbers boomed. By the late 1880s, the bunnies had caused so much damage that local authorities came up with a proposal. They'd offer the equivalent of almost $2 million today to anyone who could come up with a solution to this long-eared problem. Nobody claimed the prize, but a commission did gather a bit over a decade later and came up with the fence idea. Maintaining those fences was complicated. They had inspectors keeping an eye, with each one responsible for a stretch about 500 miles long. There were also these boundary riders patrolling smaller sections, using bikes at first, then switching to camels or using camels to haul buggies. They even tried using cars at one point, but they couldn't handle the rough terrain and constantly had punctured tires. In terms of its effectiveness, well, by 1902, rabbits were already hanging out on the wrong side of the fence. That's why, 4 years later, they put up another one. It worked for a while, so much so that the local authorities didn't bother helping out farmers past that second fence with rabbit netting loans. Those caught between the two fences, however, still had a rough time dealing with rabbit trouble. Soon enough, rabbits spread even over fence number 2, and it was clear the solution didn't work. In some areas, even while the fences were being built, those sneaky bunnies found their way past them. To this day, the rabbit population still sometimes puts the Australian officials through rough times. The dingo fence may be the longest one, but it's not the weirdest. The aquarium fence in Turkey might take that prize. This 164-foot aquarium fence was built to make sure the expensive villa's ocean view would be visible from every one of its levels. These days, it gathers a lot of tourists from all over the world, eager to see the variety of fish it contains, and even the octopuses. Putting up a see-through structure wasn't hard. The real challenge was connecting the aqua fence to the Aegean Sea through a buried pipeline stretching across 13,000 feet of land. This ensures water constantly flows, keeping the aquarium clean and the fish happy. To make sure no one damages the delicate fence or steals any of the fish or two, the owner also invested in security. He installed a network of 17 cameras equipped with facial recognition. Visitors are free to look and take pictures, but step too close and you're likely to trigger alarms. Another one of those weird fences is New Zealand's bra fence. If you ever find yourself through central Otago, you might stumble upon a fence adorned with bras of all kinds of shapes, sizes, and patterns. Its story takes us back to 1999, when people in the area found 4 bras mysteriously hanging on the fence near Cardrona Valley Road. Some were a bit surprised, but then others started adding their bras to the decor. Some more bras appeared and it became a must-see spot for tourists. Its popularity was so high that at times it caused traffic problems in the area. Why is Australia so strangely empty? Why haven't we discovered so much of the ocean? Is our planet a perfect sphere? And was the Earth once more purple than green? I bet you didn't know these facts about our planet, so let's find it all out. Australia is really massive. To make it easy to understand its size, it's nearly as large as the entirety of Europe. Home to around 26 million people, Australia is among the countries with the least population per area. It's ranked only 55th for the highest population in the world, while it has the 6th largest land area. Why is so much of it empty? A good guess would be the many dangerous animals hiding behind every rock. At least this is enough for me to avoid Australia. But there's one specific reason to explain this. The dryness of Australia ensures that 85% of the population lives within 30 miles of the coast, and 80% of them live along the eastern side where rainfall is more common. But although there is an overall lack of rainfall, only 20% of Australia is unlivable desert, and only 40% is considered not habitable by human standards. The water consumption is actually higher than their average rainfall each year, but there is a further ancient water source hidden way below. which can support a much larger population. It's one of the largest underground freshwater resources in the world, the Great Artesian Basin. It covers a staggering 656,000 square miles, which is 1/5 the size of Australia. It holds enough water to cover the Earth under a 1.5 feet deep layer of water. Or, more usefully, it could provide enough water for thirsty Australians over the next 1,500 years. Only 6.5% of Australia has soil suitable for farming, so this doesn't seem like a huge amount. But in case you forgot, Australia is big, and this small percentage is about the size of France. With this massive area available for farming, Australia has more than enough to feed its population, with a further 70% of agriculture products that are exported overseas. So, with plenty of land, food, and water, why are the population figures so low? A very slow migration process is the reason. First, only people from the United Kingdom lived there. Then, they opened their borders to other Europeans, and this restriction remained in place until 1973. You would think almost 200 years would be enough time for a lot of people to migrate, but Australia was just so far away. The risk of traveling such a long way and the cost of the journey meant that people from Europe prefer the shorter and cheaper options to migrate elsewhere, like Canada or the USA. For the past 2,000 years, people have understood that Earth is round. But did you know that it's not a perfect sphere? Through the wobbly rotation of Earth, our planet constantly changes its size, very slowly of course. The North and South poles are surprisingly flat. Earth is pretty much like a ball being squished. Imagine there's a giant hand with the fingers pressing at both poles. Because of this pressure, the equator pushes a little outwards. Along with an uneven gravitational field, Earth has loads of gravity glitches, some positive and others negative, creating an uneven, rocky, and bumpy surface. Some places on Earth have more gravity than others. If you weighed yourself along the equator, you would weigh 0.5% less than at the poles. Not a whole lot, and definitely not worth the trip to change your weight. If you were to measure the length from the center of the Earth towards the furthest point of Earth, you would be shocked that Mount Everest isn't at the end of it. Instead, it's along the equator, which is the pushed-out part. Ecuador's mountain Chimborazo would actually be the tallest point on Earth, as it's the furthest from the center. We still have around 80% of the ocean to map, which is crazy considering how much of the solar system we've explored in comparison. But we're still aware of many of the unbelievable details about the ocean. It covers over 80% of the world's surface, where 94% of the Earth's wildlife lives. And from some of the life in it, up to 80% of the world's oxygen is produced mainly from plankton, algae, and bacteria. One of the most famous, already mapped places is the Mariana Trench. It's the deepest point on Earth, as low as almost 7 miles deep. That's a huge, 5 times the length of the Grand Canyon, and deeper than Mount Everest is tall. It's also home to one of the most ancient seabeds on Earth, casually laying low for about 180 million years. The pressure at the bottom is over 1,000 bars, but although this is 1,000 times more than normal pressure, life still flourishes here. Throughout the ocean, there is an estimated over 3 million shipwrecks lying in the murky depths. Countless artifacts sit there untouched, and there could be more than all the world's museums. The mid-ocean ridge is the longest in the world, reaching 40,000 miles. That's almost 10 times the size of the Andes, the longest mountain range on land. The sun is the reason behind the blue and aqua colors of the ocean. This color isn't from the reflection of the sky, though they are both blue for the same reason. The surface of our planet receives white light from the sun, and it absorbs the orange, red, and yellow light stronger. It doesn't absorb the blue light so much, so it returns to how we see it. Of course, this only occurs based on how pure the water is. If the water is full of mud or algae, they scatter the light and overpower the water's natural blueness. There are many factors that determine what color we see on our planet. Could you believe that the Earth was green before? Instead, it was purple. Chlorophyll in our atmosphere absorbs mainly blue and red wavelengths from the sun and reflects the green ones to what we see our planet as today. Long ago, ancient microbes called retinal dominated the Earth instead of chlorophyll. They absorbed green light and reflected red and violet light. Those microbes had a simpler structure, so they were easier to produce in the low oxygen environment of the early Earth. They provided our planet with a purplish color instead of green. But chlorophyll is more efficient, and as the Earth was developing, it eventually took over. Imagine that billions of years ago, faraway observers could see our home as a small purple dot. I wonder if we could have also been purple. Probably not. The biggest tree on Earth is a giant sequoia named General Sherman. It stands over 280 feet, almost reaching the height of a 26-story building. They believe it to be 2,700 years old, with a circumference of 1,000 inches. Its weight is a staggering 1,800 tons. That's heavy, but it isn't the heaviest living thing on Earth. In Utah, a huge grove of trees called Pando works like a single colony of trees. The massive root system connects all of them together with up to 47,000 stems. It weighs up to 6,000 tons and is 80,000 years old. It makes it the oldest living thing known to humans. Now, what about the biggest area of one being? Off the coast of Western Australia, a seaweed grows to an unthinkable size. The Poseidon's ribbon weed has been growing for 4,500 years, spreading underground clone shoots. It's all connected and shares the same DNA with most of its shoots. It covers a massive 77 square miles, the same size as 28,000 soccer fields, or the size of Nebraska. And it won't stop there either, as it continues to grow by 2 feet each year. It's hard to even picture the scale of these enormous beings. Now, just imagine if they were all purple. When you think of beaches, the first scary thing that pops into your head is probably sharks, right? Those poor guys have a bad rap as the big bullies of the ocean, but honestly, they have way fewer fatal run-ins than jellyfish, algae, and even sand. Every year, tons of people flock to the beach to soak up the sun and chill by the waves. But digging holes in the sand can actually be pretty risky. In February 2024, a tragic incident occurred when a 7-year-old girl got trapped after a roughly 5-foot deep hole she dug with her brother caved in on her. Despite efforts from bystanders to rescue her, help arrived too late. You might think digging in the sand is harmless, but deep holes can be a final exit trap. Sand is defined by its size, not by its material. Most beach sand is quartz, but tropical spots might have coral sand. The weight of the sand depends on what's mixed in. Pure quartz is pretty light, around 90 pounds per cubic foot dried out, while more mixed sands can get way heavier. When sand is wet, it holds its shape better, but when it dries out, it's a whole different story. If you dig a hole and then it dries, it's likely to collapse. The danger increases dramatically if someone is standing near the edge, adding weight and making it even more unstable. Once that sand starts falling in, it fills up all the air pockets, making it hard for anyone trapped inside to breathe. Rescuing a person from a sand collapse is tough. Sand is heavy and keeps collapsing, so rescuers need to move fast. Ideally, they've got about 3 to 5 minutes before the trapped person suffocates. If you ever get in such a situation, the advice is to expose the person's mouth so they can breathe while someone else digs them out. If you're heading to the beach, be smart about holes. The best rule is to never dig a hole deeper than the knees of the shortest person in your group. Also, it's a good idea to fill any holes after you're done playing. It's all too easy for someone to stumble into a forgotten pit, and even a shallow hole can cause injuries. From 1997 to 2007, those sand holes took 31 lives in the US, and that's just within 10 years. Remember I told you sharks are responsible for fewer lives? From 1997 to this day, in 27 years, 29 people in the US have met their early demise because of sharks. Hitting the beach only to find a bunch of algae? Total buzzkill! But while some algae are totally fine, even to munch on, others can bring serious health risks, even if you're just hanging next to them. Algal blooms, or red tides, happen when algae go on a wild growth spree. These blooms can release nasty toxins that are bad news for humans, fish, shellfish, and even birds. One of the most well-known algal blooms rolls around almost every summer on Florida's Gulf Coast, leading to shellfish that are no longer safe to munch on. Even the ones that aren't toxic can throw a wrench in the ecosystem. When all that algae eventually withers and breaks down, it uses up the oxygen in the water, leaving marine life gasping for air. Folks definitely need to steer clear of eating shellfish from areas hit by these toxic algal blooms. Back in 1990, 6 fishermen almost met a tragic end after scarfing down some steamed mussels they'd gathered near Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Swimming in those waters doesn't always pose a serious health risk, but it's still not recommended. Some people might experience skin irritation or itchy eyes. Also, make sure to steer clear of swimming near dead fish, since that's where harmful bacteria can hang out. If you start to feel weird after getting in the water, it's best to get out and rinse off with fresh water right away. You know, it's not always some specific thing that makes certain beaches risky. Sometimes, beaches themselves are just full of surprises. Take Eddy Bay or Mission Beach in Australia, for example. The chances are you'll have to share the sand with cassowaries, some of the most intimidating birds on the planet. Picture getting all set to relax and sunbathe, only to find these giant flightless birds hanging out nearby. They're like emus, but scarier. They can weigh over 160 pounds and might be a bit aggressive, so watch out. If those birds don't freak you out, then the black sand beaches of Kilauea might just do the trick. They sure look inviting, but these beaches are right next to one of the most active volcanoes in the world, Mount Kilauea, which has been erupting since 1983, pouring hot lava into the ocean. These hot waters are not a big deal compared to some Hawaiian beaches. If you ever want to take a dip at Hanakapiai Beach on Kauai's coast, reconsider that plan. The beach is infamous for its strong rip currents that can pull you out to sea in an instant. If you find yourself caught in one, the nearest safe shore is a daunting 6 miles away. Official records show at least 30 fatalities here, but a nearby sign reportedly tallies up to over 80. Rips are those strong currents that pull water out to the ocean, and they can quickly drag people and stuff away from the shallow water near the beach. Typically, they move at about 1 to 2 miles per hour, but they can speed up to 4 or 5 miles per hour, which is faster than the speed of some professional swimmers. These currents are especially fierce when the surf is big, but you should never underestimate any body of water. You can also find rips around river mouths, estuaries, and even near structures like piers and groins. They can be tricky to spot, but you might notice a patch of churning, choppy water on the ocean's surface that signals a rip current. Riptides aren't exclusive to some specific location. They can be found across the world. Playa Zipolite in Mexico, Australia's Fraser Island, and many more. Another water danger is shore break waves. Those are fierce waves that crash straight onto the beach, often right on the sand. Imagine the force of a car slamming down on your body. That's kind of what getting caught in a shore break feels like. Such waves can cause some gnarly injuries, particularly to your neck and spine, even if they don't look super huge. Hawaii is notorious for its intense shore breaks, especially spots like Keiki Beach, where surfers throw caution to the wind for a thrill. So, if you're hitting a Hawaiian beach, keep an eye on those insider waves and always look out for lifeguards. Getting stung by jellyfish is something that happens a lot to folks who are swimming, wading, or diving in the ocean. Those long tentacles can deliver venom through thousands of tiny, sharp stingers. However, to us humans, this venom doesn't do much. Yeah, it's very unpleasant. It gives us burning sensations and probably some skin redness, but that's mostly it. You won't even spot the stung area in a couple of days. Most jellyfish stings will heal up on their own in a few days or weeks with some at-home care, even though sometimes they can lead to something more dangerous with way more severe symptoms. However, if you're hanging out in the coastal waters of northern Australia and the Indo-Pacific region, and you get stung by a jellyfish, you're in for a lot of trouble, my friends. See, it's the area where box jellyfish live, and these jellies are no joke. Some people rightfully call them sea wasps or even marine stingers. They're probably the most hazardous and toxic jellyfish out there. Their sting is incredibly excruciating, so much so that some folks have experienced cardiac arrest before they even made it to the shore. Rumor has it, those jellies are responsible for taking nearly 80 lives in Australia since records started. So how do you tell who's who? Unlike regular jellies, box jellyfish got this pale blue see-through vibe. Also, they got their name because their bell-shaped body looks like a cube.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention please. Alright, just listen up. The Guinness World Records Award for the deepest human invasion into the Earth's crust goes to the Kola Superdeep Borehole. Ooh. Its depth is 7.4 miles. You can find it in the icy part of Russia where the winter temperature of -40 degrees Fahrenheit is a common thing. Well, that's chilling. Local scientists started to dig it in the 1970s. The grand plan was to reach a depth of 9.3 miles. It was a purely scientific project to study the Earth's crust and maybe get to the hot mantle. Well, when it's so cold outside, it kind of makes sense. Up to the depth of 4.3 miles, the drill easily coped with granite rock. Then, denser layers came and broke the drill. The scientists had to change the drilling pattern. In the end, it resembled a tree with many branches. The deeper it went, the hotter it became. The temperature went up to 350 degrees. The equipment was constantly out of order and work was stopped completely in 1992. If you see this legendary place with your own eyes, you'd hardly realize there's an abyss right beneath your feet. The borehole looks like a rather small and unambitious hole in the ground. The place is now abandoned, overgrown with moss and rust. It has its fair share of myths surrounding it too. One of them says people hear strange sounds like moans and screams from the depths. In reality, of course, none of this is true. At the time, many countries were engaged in the study of the Earth's crust. For example, Germany. They duly noted the experience of the Kola borehole and made a super tech drill that could withstand extreme temperatures. A location was chosen in Bavaria at the junction of two tectonic plates. In the past, they were the shores of an ancient ocean. In the early 90s, a group of researchers began drilling a well there. But already at a depth of 4 miles, the Earth fought back. It deflected the drill from the vertical, and then the temperature made a surprise spike to 520 degrees. All these problems forced scientists to stop at a depth of 5.6 miles. In 1977, a company in Austria started drilling a well at a site with plentiful resources, or so they thought. They did find large gas reserves, but there was an unexpected problem. As the drill entered the chamber, the well collapsed. They tried again and made a new, even bigger borehole that went as deep as 5.3 miles. But ironically, they weren't able to drill into the gas chamber again. In Sweden, expectations from drilling weren't met either. At the site of a huge crater 30 miles in diameter, they started the search for gas and oil. It's the largest crater in Europe, which must have appeared because of a meteorite. The well went deep, but unfortunately, nothing of interest was found. At 4 miles down, the drilling stopped. One of the deepest oil wells in the world is Bertha Rogers in Oklahoma. Its depth is almost 6 miles. In 1974, the Lone Star Company achieved such a stunning result in just over 500 days. For 5 years, it was the deepest borehole in the world, until the Kola Superdeep was drilled. Bertha Rogers could probably have gone even deeper, but the drill suddenly struck a molten sulfur deposit. It grew solid around the drill string, breaking the rig. If you can't get to the Earth's mantle from the ground, do it from the water. Project Mohole was just about that. It got its name from moho, the threshold between crust and mantle, and, well, a hole. You know, moho. Well, anyway, The project was launched in the 1960s and was overseen by the U.S. National Science Foundation. The crust on the ocean floor is thinner than on land, and the mantle is closer. Scientists had hoped that a 3-mile-deep underwater borehole would bring them there. They chose a location in the Pacific Ocean, where the bottom was at a depth of about 2 miles. There were 2 phases planned for the project, and the first was a success. A total of 5 wells were drilled, each not exceeding 600 feet in depth. Unfortunately, the second phase never happened. Too many problems were involved. So, apparently, there ain't no holes. Today, underwater wells are commonplace. Their main purpose is extraction of oil and gas. The EVA 4000 American drilling platform is located in the Gulf of Mexico. This huge structure rises above the water at a height of a 20-story building. The platform moves around looking for oil at depths of over 6,000 feet, and when it finds a good spot, it's capable of drilling up to 6 miles into the seabed. Now, let's move to Africa. Here at the very south of the continent, there's a huge quarry, the Kimberley Diamond Mine. Now, it's easy to drill through the ground when you have the best equipment, but this hole was literally dug by hand. About 50,000 workers dug it tirelessly in the late 19th and early 20th centuries using ordinary shovels. And no, they hardly wanted to get to the opposite side of the earth. They were attracted by the enchanting brilliance of diamonds. One of the most famous precious stones, Tiffany, weighing 128.5 carats, was found in the Kimberley mine. The depth of the hole reached 790 feet. Just imagine how difficult it was to return from work. It was like climbing 66 floors on foot. When the work stopped, the bottom of the pit was partially filled with soil, and then water flooded the place. Today, it's a popular sight among tourists, and surely, each of them secretly hopes to find a diamond there. With the industrial boom, oil became even more popular than diamonds, and the oil wells around the world are getting deeper. For example, in 2008, Qatar drilled the longest oil well at that time, El Shaheen. It was 7.6 miles long, and it only took them a little over a month. The vertical part of the shaft reaches 6.7 miles. Stretched up instead of down, the shaft would reach the height of commercial airplane flights. The record was broken in 2012 by the Z44 Shavo oil well. When they measured its length, the new hole beat the one in Qatar by about 300 feet. Just for a clearer picture, either of these 2 oil wells would fit almost 15 Burj Khalifas or 40 Eiffel Towers. Moving on to Canada and high up into the sky to look at it from space. See those 2 huge holes? If you don't know, those are diamond mining sites. You might think that an alien invasion happened while you slept right through. This enormous place is on the island of Lac de Gras, not far from the Arctic Circle. This is a whole city with industrial and administrative buildings, a boiler house, living quarters for workers, and even an airstrip. In 2018, the largest diamond in North America was found here. It weighed 552 carats. Apart from diamonds and oil, the bowels of the earth have a lot of other useful stuff. One example is copper. Let's go to Utah and see the giant Bingham Canyon mine. Copper has been mined here for over a century. The width of this quarry reaches 2.5 miles, and it goes half a mile down. Just imagine how breathtaking a paragliding flight would be over this powerful structure. But the greatest treasure of the planet is, of course, fresh water. And to get to it, people would dig as deep as they have to. The deepest water well in the world is found in Great Britain. It was dug by hand in the 19th century. People just had to keep on digging because they couldn't get to water, and as a result, they reached almost 1,300 feet. When the water finally gushed from under the ground, the workers barely managed to escape from the well. Many of us spend a huge part of our life under the ground. Yeah, I mean the subway. The deepest underground station in the world is in Kyiv, Ukraine. It takes over 5 minutes for the escalator to lower you to the platform. After all, you're traveling nearly 350 feet down. Sometimes nature decides to dig something deep on its own. Most likely, the Mariana Trench is the deepest point in the ocean. Its bottom, called the Challenger Deep, is 6.8 miles below sea level. Sunlight never gets there. The pressure down below is more than 1,000 times higher than on the surface. If you decide to dive to the bottom, you'll spend 4 hours of your time and a whole lot of money on the necessary equipment. Scientists have even found mountains there. By the way, if Everest was moved to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, we wouldn't be able to see its top on the surface. A little riddle: can you dig water? The answer is yes, if it's in the form of ice. The Uran Observatory in Antarctica made it by digging boreholes up to 1.5 miles deep using hot water. Optical detector filaments pass through them. They capture elementary particles, neurons. In fact, this is a telescope that's directed not upwards but downwards into the ice. But that's a completely different story. A mega drought might hit Australia soon, and this isn't just about a couple of dry seasons. We're talking about 20 years of little or no rain. While Australia could be facing the longest and most devastating drought since official records began, the rest of the world might struggle to buy bread, flour, or cereals. Energy prices are likely to spike globally, and neighboring countries like New Zealand, Indonesia, and Malaysia must be prepared to receive Australians directly affected by the lack of water. To truly understand how severe this situation could become, we should first examine past disasters. First off, Australia is no stranger to droughts, and this phenomenon can happen across their entire territory. From 2017 to 2019, the southeast part of the country went through what they call the tinderbox drought. This was a severe bone-dry event where the cooler months saw only about half the usual rainfall. Parts of Australia became so dry that wildfires were a constant threat. Crops failed, and water was scarce. This drought was also thought to have contributed to the Black Summer fire disaster. By the end of 2019, bushfires were raging across the country on a scale never seen before, with people describing them as rivers of lava flowing down from treetops. The losses were staggering. The tourist industry alone took a hit of $2.8 billion, and over 7,000 jobs disappeared as a result of this difficult period. The tinderbox drought was a big reminder of what Australia might face in the future. That's why it's so important to understand what happened in the past to get a full picture of a possible 20-year mega drought. But there is one problem. Even though droughts are relatively common in Australia, the rainfall data available until today isn't enough for researchers to predict the future, and our records only go back to around 1900. So experts decided to study tree rings to uncover missing environmental data. If you look at a tree stump, you'll notice concentric rings on its surface. As trees grow, they form new rings, and the thickness of these rings depends on how much water they get. During a megadrought, the rings appear thinner because the trees don't have much water. Unfortunately, these natural records usually only go back a few hundred years, and it only tells us about specific local conditions, not the situation across all of Australia. So, experts turn to computer models to simulate how Earth's climate changed from the year 850 to 2000. This approach helped them to paint a picture of when megadroughts might have occurred in Australia and how to predict what might happen in the future. But what they were really interested in was whether the human factor might be making this scenario worse over the years and if we are somehow intensifying these dry periods. So, are we to blame for these megadroughts? The short answer is, we're not sure yet. On one hand, dry periods in Australia do seem to last longer than they did before factories and machines became common. On the other hand, they don't seem to be getting more intense or happening more often than before industrial times. This means a drought lasting 20 years might not be directly linked to human activities. Actually, this kind of phenomenon is just a normal part of how rainfall changes in Australia over time. This is backed up by evidence from ice cores, which suggests that a 39-year drought hit eastern Australia around 800 years ago. What makes it all so fascinating is that there isn't just one cause for this phenomenon. I mean, there is no single mechanism that explains all cases of megadroughts. It happens because the right combination of ocean and atmospheric conditions come together, and you end up with a drought. And just by random chance, you might have periods where there are 100-year-long droughts. Despite what many people think, mega-droughts are not geographically isolated. They have occurred on every continent except Antarctica over the past 2,000 years, and are often linked to natural events. For instance, mega-droughts in North America and Southwest South America were driven by El Niño, where the Pacific Ocean near the equator gets warmer than usual, disturbing normal weather patterns. They are not rare events either. In fact, the U.S. Southwest has been experiencing a mega-drought since 2000. It's being considered the driest period in 1,200 years for the region. Major reservoirs like Lake Mead and Lake Powell are at low levels. Heat waves are hitting cities like Phoenix and Las Vegas harder than ever. And wildfires are happening more frequently as the land gets drier. Now, let's think about the future. Even though we have a very recent and concrete example from the U.S., research can't exactly predict how a 20-year megadrought would play out in Australia. Usually, such events show up mainly as reduced rainfall and snowfall. But in most areas, the increase in drought risk will be caused by a warmer, more arid atmosphere. So the ground will probably look parched and cracked, rivers and lakes will likely shrink, and the sky will be relentlessly clear and blue, with barely a cloud in sight. Farmers might struggle to grow crops, making grocery prices rise worldwide. Things like bread, flour, and cereals may become scarcer, as Australia supplies about 13% of global wheat exports. Coal mines might be affected, as they depend on water for extraction, washing, and processing. That might drive up power costs for industries around the world, which could be passed on to consumers, impacting global growth and inflation. As cities might face water shortages, Australians will likely find new ways to conserve every drop or maybe move to New Zealand or Southeast Asia. Now, you're probably thinking, when is this big event going to happen? Honestly, it's really hard to predict exactly. Megadroughts can happen every 150 to 1,000 years, but experts think Australia should be ready for one to happen in the next 10 years or so. And this possibly should be taken seriously. This phenomenon has been known to contribute to the collapse of entire civilizations. Take the Akkadians of Mesopotamia, who built the world's first empire more than 4,000 years ago. Studies of moisture at the ruins of Akkadian cities suggest that they experienced a massive drought lasting 300 years, and this may have led to their collapse. A similar thing happened to the Assyrian Empire, which existed over 2,700 years ago, in what is now northern Iraq. For years, it was a real mystery why they left their capital of Nineveh and never returned. But recent studies of a stalagmite in the Cunaba cave revealed that the rise and fall of the empire coincided with a wet period followed by a 125-year-long mega-drought. Because they were very dependent on seasonal rain for agriculture, this dry period made their life much harder. Even though experts now believe they probably left because of the dryness, the question of where they went is still a mystery. So, yep, mega-droughts may have played a role in the collapse of great civilizations in the past. But on the positive side, we've come a long way since then, and recent climate technologies can help us prepare for events like this. Now that we know a 20-year mega-drought is very much possible and might happen soon, Australia has some time to get ready for it. Developing strong water management plans to mitigate the severe impacts of a mega-drought is more than necessary, and it's also important to create community support networks to provide emotional and financial support to people, particularly farmers, who are more affected directly by this event. If initiatives like these emerge in the coming years, those 20 years of drought could be less intense than most people might expect. Australia used to have its own giants. Those were huge animals that could have dwarfed anything living on this continent these days. Scientists found the remains of many of those ancient creatures in the Narracuta Caves in South Australia, 4 hours away from Adelaide. It's a lovely region, but it can be treacherous. Watch out for holes the ground is pocked with. Known as pitfall traps, Many of them are no wider than a coffee table. They're deep and plunge into the darkest of caverns. One of such caverns is called Victoria Fossil Cave, and it's a treasury that's been hiding the bones of around 45,000 animals for centuries. Some of the oldest bones belong to creatures far more terrifying than any animal you can encounter today. Those were the ancient Australian megafauna, huge beasts that roamed the continent during the Pleistocene epoch. During those, there were giant snakes, huge flightless birds, wombat-like creatures the size of a rhinoceros, and many others. One of the largest examples of the Australian megafauna scientists have discovered so far is the Diprotodon. That giant herbivorous creature was 10 feet long and 6.5 feet tall, and weighed more than 6,000 pounds, about as much as a small Asian elephant. Even though this terrifying beast didn't eat meat, it could have smashed other animals with its sheer weight. Scientists have found the remains of hundreds of such creatures all over Australia, so it's safe to say that no other animal from that time or in that location was larger than this giant. Despite its creepy appearance, the Diprotodon was a relative to the modern-day wombat, and those are known to sometimes pounce humans. The Diprotodon had toes that pointed inward and were well suited for digging burrows. On the other hand, Diprotodon was a giant, and it was unlikely that it used to do so. It was likely a trait it had inherited from its smaller burrowing ancestors, or it could have used its claws to search for roots. This theory is supported by the fact that the animal's pouch was facing backward. It prevented any dirt from collecting inside while the creature was digging. Since this animal was so big, it didn't have to worry much about predators. Up until 60,000 years ago, when the first humans appeared on the continent, full-grown Diprotodons only had to look out for creatures like the quincana. Measuring in at a whopping 20 feet long, the quincana was a land crocodile. It lived in Australia from around 20 million to 40,000 years ago. It disappeared along with most other mega creatures of the last ice age. It's thought to be the result of the first humans coming to the continent. Even though the quincana was extremely fast and dangerous, it was possible that this creature got outcompeted by human hunters who took all available prey. Unlike modern crocodiles that are mainly aquatic, that mighty beast was a land dweller. Scientists figured it out by studying the quincana's legs. They were able to support and carry the body clear off the ground. It means there was no escape for ancient people once the quincana spotted them. Modern crocodiles can only push themselves along on their bellies. Such an adaptation allowed the quincana to chase its prey for long periods of time, exhausting it in the process. Another creepy feature of this ancient monster was its teeth. Aquatic crocs have conical teeth. Those are great for gripping and holding on to prey underwater. But quincana had knife-like teeth, ideal for slicing soft-bodied animals like, mammals. Another Australian monster, Thylacoleo, wasn't all that large, but it didn't make it any less terrifying. It was still among the top predators and the biggest carnivorous animals in Australia. This creature was a true oddity of nature, even by prehistoric standards. First, its teeth resembled not those of a regular predator, but those of a rodent. Its front incisors were enlarged, taking the place of canines. Premolars were also shaped like blades. They were used for cutting flesh and bone. At first, scientists thought that Thylacoleo used those teeth to eat nuts and fruits. But later, a study showed that the use of such teeth was better suited on necks and spines. The jaws of this ancient creature were immensely powerful. A 220-pound Thylacoleo had a bite force similar to that of a present-day 550-pound lion. It means that the animal could easily bring down prey much larger than itself. Then there was Thylacoleo's tail. It had strong muscles which provided the animal with the ability to use the tail as support when tackling large prey. The Thylacoleo had retractable claws, and this feature is very uncommon among marsupials. It allowed the animal to keep its razor-sharp hooks from getting blunt and could help it get a better grip on its prey. Scientists are quite sure that, like today's leopards, the Thylacoleo could climb trees and jump on other animals from above. It was done so fast and stealthily, they never knew what hit them. The creature's rear feet support this theory. The first toe there was reduced, but the foot had a rough pad like what modern-day possums have. It allowed them to have a better grip while climbing. Right after scientists found the first skull of the Meliolania, this animal was classified as a lizard. That's why its name translates to small groomer. But after they discovered more complete fossils, it turned out that the Meliolania was a giant turtle. But that's not all. It was one of the largest land turtles to ever have existed. The main reason researchers initially believed the creature to be a lizard was the fact that its skull was adorned with a series of spikes. It's something the modern-day horned lizard can boast. But even after discovering the true nature of the Meliolania, scientists still don't know how to properly catalog it. It might have been a creature that folded its neck under its spine, or it could have folded it to the side. Beside those defensive mechanisms on its head, the Meliolania was also equipped with a spiked tail, which was probably used to prevent predators from attacking the animal from behind. Most species of the Meliolania disappeared around 2,000 to 3,000 years ago because of humans who hunted them to extinction in both Australia and on the surrounding islands. It took around 2 centuries for these turtles to go extinct in that region of the globe. The Megalania was a giant Australian lizard that existed at the end of the Pleistocene epoch. It looked like a Komodo dragon and the Australian monitor lizard, which are both believed to be Megalania's closest living relatives. Fossils tell us that the ancient animal was anywhere from 15 to 26 feet in length. Ow! The youngest fossil remains of this ancient Australian monitor lizard date back to about 50,000 years ago. The first indigenous settlers must have encountered Megalania, which led to the lizard's extinction. Originally, scientists thought that the Megalania was the only member of the genus Megalania, but these days it belongs to the genus Varanus, which means that the prehistoric creature is closely related to other Australian monitor lizards. Our next giant creature on our list was once dubbed an ostrich on steroids. I mean, look at it. It was the last of the thunderbirds to go extinct in Australia. The Genyorus lived on the continent at the same time as early humans. They might have coexisted for 15,000 years or so before the huge bird eventually disappeared. This theory has some proof. The bird's fossils found along with human artifacts. Some cave paintings also depict flightless birds similar to the Genyorus in size and shape. Although it wasn't the largest bird in Australia, the goose-like creature was still as tall as a grown-up man and weighed around 550 pounds. Even a modern-day ostrich can be dangerous if it feels threatened. Imagine meeting its giant prehistoric relative. Scientists are still arguing about its diet. Many believe the creature was an herbivore, but there's still a chance that the Genyornis was a partial scavenger. Its small, stubby wings and powerful hoof-like legs hint that the bird could have been a plant eater. But its huge beak and exceptionally deep lower jaw evoke suspicion. Such features are highly unusual in birds.
You're driving around with your friend Annie in the wild Australian outback. The sun is scorching hot, but you see a mob of cute kangaroos hopping around. You stop the car and you get out to film them with your friends. You even go live to impress your friends and followers. Suddenly, one of the kangaroos leaps towards you at full velocity, ready to swing. Alright, let's freeze right here for a second before you or your friend get hurt. Kangaroos have extremely powerful legs and can jump around 30 feet in the air. Those strong legs can let them hop at speeds of up to 30 miles per hour, faster than any average human. So if you're thinking of outrunning a mob of angry kangaroos or a single kangaroo, then don't. They'll chase after you and knock you down before you even reach your top speed. Their tails are strong and sometimes act like a fifth limb when they're grazing in a field. Kangaroos generally eat grass like cows, but also feast on shrubs, moss, and even fungi. Their tails are essential for keeping balance. They can stand as tall as 6 feet, with their tail making up half of that. Back to you guys. The kangaroo is only a few feet away from you. The first thing you have to do is protect your body. Turn it sideways and extend your arm out. Make sure your head is out of reach. Their paws have very sharp claws, so you don't want them laying any jabs on you, especially your head. They kick with both feet, which means they rest their body on their tails and extend both legs to push kick their aggressors, aka Annie and you. Their feet are huge, which makes them even more dangerous. Well, time is still frozen, so you and Annie get into position and are ready for the kangaroo attack. And action! The kangaroo stands face to face with you like a boxer in a ring. It moves closer, but you're in the correct position to reduce damage from your end as much as you can. Even though you know how to defend yourself, facing off with a 6-foot kangaroo isn't the best idea. The best you can do is slowly back away without startling it. Don't turn your back on it, you might get a surprise attack. If backing up doesn't help, let it know it's won this battle. Don't return any eye contact if you can. Cower yourself. You might have missed some warning signs while observing them from afar. The kangaroos weren't stomping their feet because they were excited to see you. They were telling you not to come any closer. When one of them hopped over to you, it stood high on its legs and flexed its muscles to show dominance. The biggest fail of all is that you pulled over while they were grazing peacefully. They thought of you as a threat and went into defensive mode. The mob has several joeys, or baby kangaroos, sticking their heads out of their mother's pouches. Female kangaroos have a pouch on their belly made of a fold of skin to house the babies. When they're first born, they're only the size of a grape, but then blossom to the giants that they are. Only after 10 months, joeys are old enough to move out of mom's pouch and hop on their own. So, you and Annie survived that confrontation for now. But what happens when you're face to face with a 40-foot kangaroo? I'm just kidding, we're keeping it real here. It would be super difficult to face off with a grizzly bear. The first thing you would need to know about grizzlies is that they're very cute when they're berry picking, or just scratching their backs on tree bark. But their dark side is scarier than a kangaroo's. You're having a little picnic with Annie when suddenly a grizzly bear approaches after smelling some yummy food. Don't panic, we'll freeze time here to give you a chance to think about what to do. In general, the best way to survive a grizzly attack is to avoid it altogether. Grizzlies are wanderers, always looking for the best spots to find some food. Their sense of smell is impeccable, so its nose led the bear right to your picnic. The bear is very close to you. No need to panic. You should show the bear that you're just a visitor on its territory. Back away slowly while speaking in a low and calm tone. It needs to know that you're submitting to it, as it's the dominant creature in this encounter. There's a lot of tension when you're face to face with a bear, so don't turn your back and make a break for it. That will only let the bear chase you down, and you won't win in that race. They're faster than humans and can swim and climb trees, so unless you sprout some wings and fly away, do not try to outrun a grizzly bear. Next, you should avoid eye contact. Just like the cute and cuddly kangaroos, bears take it very seriously and watch your every move. They also consider direct eye contact as a sign of aggression, as if you want to challenge them. Grizzlies also like to play a game of chicken. They wait to see your moves and can even fake a charge to see how you're going to react. Either way, you have to stand your ground. If the bear lowers its head and protrudes its neck towards you, then it knows that it wants to charge right at you. Since we froze time for now, we can't know for sure what its next move is going to be. Let's jump back into action to see what it'll do, because you'll have to plan your next move depending on the bear's move. And action! The grizzly bear isn't showing any signs of aggression so far. It's just curious about the setting. Remember your training, no eye contact. Okay, the bear is showing some signs of aggression now, which means it could potentially attack you. Stand your ground, it's getting closer. The best thing to do in this scenario is to completely submit to it by laying face down on the ground, covering your head with your arms. Don't move. The bear might understand that you're submitting to it and walk away. Sometimes bears will stick around for a while before leaving you alone. Luckily, this bear only wanted the food from the picnic, so it grabs the sandwiches and runs away. You guys were lucky this time, but if the bear did attack you, you'd have to fight it off as much as you can. You can use any objects nearby to help you. It's best to aim for the most sensitive spots, like the bear's eyes and nose, with all your strength. What makes cougars stand out from other predators is that they're excellent stalkers. You're hiking in the forest, and you don't realize that you have an unwelcomed guest along with you. Cougars will stalk you if they think you're good to eat and can pounce from out of nowhere, and if it knows it's the right time. These giant cats generally don't attack people, but who knows what's on their mind. The rule of thumb when face to face with a cougar is pretty much the same as with other animals. Stand your ground and don't run. Running will only trigger the cat, as it will outrun you for sure. These cats are strong and have very quick reflexes. Their claws are powerful and their bites are even worse. You don't want to be chased by one of these. Now that you're standing your ground, make yourself appear bigger than the cougar. That's right, raise your arms and puff out your chest. Always keep eye contact to try to assert dominance. You don't have to appear weaker or submissive to the cat, unlike when facing a grizzly or a kangaroo. On the contrary, you need to show that you're more powerful than it is. So don't cower down or break a sweat. It's watching your every move. The next steps really depend on the cougar. Let's resume, shall we? Okay, it's showing signs of aggressive behavior. It's a tough kitty, and it doesn't want to lose this game. If appearing tall doesn't do anything, then try waving your arms around and shout from the top of your lungs. If you can throw some rocks at it to scare it off, then it would be another plus for you. The kitty looks like it wants to attack. No matter what, stand your ground. After a while, the cougar submits and runs away. You won this encounter. Now, just because you got away with this doesn't mean you're good in the future. If the cougar did attack you, then your only option would be to fight back. Find some objects nearby to help you, and don't give up.
Ooh, from giant spiders to venomous snakes, we all get freaked out by Australian creatures. Yeah, me too. But newly discovered fossils show that things were way more dangerous 120 million years ago, when this land was completely ruled by massive razor-clawed megaraptors. Yeah, I'm glad I wasn't around then. These dinosaurs were about 26 feet long and walked on two legs, just like the famous T-Rex. They were fast, fierce hunters, with a superpower: their hug. Yep, their massive, muscular forearms had huge curved claws, perfect for grabbing and holding onto prey. Uh-oh. They would wrap their arms around their poor victims, just like a hug, and trap them with no chance of escape. And even though their teeth were quite small, they were still sharp enough to rip through flesh. The first time we heard about megaraptors was in the late 90s, when a paleontologist discovered their fossils in the region of Patagonia, Argentina. Since then, no one has ever found a complete skeleton, only fragments. But probably the most important one yet was uncovered in Australia at the beginning of this year. Researchers were exploring Victoria's stunning coastline when they stumbled upon megaraptor fossils. First, they spotted bones from its lower legs and a few vertebrae washed up on the beach. Even though they were working with just a couple of fragments, a deeper analysis confirmed that these belonged to a megaraptor. And not just any megaraptor, it was the oldest one ever discovered. This discovery gets even more exciting because it adds weight to the theory that these dinosaurs might have originated in Australia. But we already knew that they roamed the land down under since early 2023, when researchers found the top of a megaraptor skull in the country. So let's rewind a bit. We first found their remains in Argentina, right? Right. But then, years later, researchers found fossils of the same family of dinosaurs on the other side of the world, in Australia. If the ones in Oceania were older, how did these creatures end up in South America? Of course, they didn't fly there. They didn't cross continents by swimming either, although there is a theory that they could swim. Remember, we're talking about the dinosaur era, which happened millions of years ago. And back then, Australia and Argentina were actually pretty close. Basically, they were one. Both lands were part of the supercontinent known as Gondwana, and they were connected through Antarctica. Wait, but wasn't this path freezing? I mean, yeah, these dinos had to pass through Antarctica to get to their destination, but they weren't freezing their tails off. This all happened during the mid-Cretaceous period, when the weather was super warm. Back then, the poles were covered in plants, not ice. So let's just say they took full advantage of the good weather to make the crossing. Now, about 180 million years ago, Gondwana started to break apart. At some point, Australia drifted away from the supercontinent, cutting it off from other landmasses, including South America. That's why the same dinosaurs showed up in completely different parts of the world. Mystery solved. Now, let's get back to that recent discovery. The researchers didn't just find a few traces of megaraptors on the beach. In total, they uncovered 250 dinosaur bones at the site, but only 5 of them were really important. They belong to 3 different species of dinosaurs that, as it turns out, all lived in Victoria at the same time. So yeah, we've already talked about those first 2 bones. They were from the Megaraptor. Next, we have a shin bone from a Onenlagiine. That's my best shot at pronouncing it. It's a dino also known as the southern raptor. This is a type of dromaeosaur with a long snout. And the last 2 shin bones of different sizes came from a Carcharodontosaurus, whose name means shark-toothed lizard. This one is a particularly big deal for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's the first evidence that this species lived in Australia. And number 2, it was small, and that is pretty surprising since we've always thought of this species as being massive. Fossils found in Argentina, for example, show this dinosaur reached a length of about 36 feet. But the one in Australia was much smaller, measuring only around 6 to 10 feet long. And that's still plenty big. Basically, what we're saying is that the way predators were ranked in these 2 parts of the world was completely different. In South America, Carcharodontosaurs grew to massive T-Rex-sized giants, towering over megaraptors and dominating the landscape. But in Australia, it was the complete opposite. There, huge, powerful megaraptorids roamed the land alongside smaller Carcharodontosaurs. So the predator dynamic was different. And all of this just shows how unique the ecosystem in Victoria was back then. Although isolated dinosaur bones have been found in Western and South Australia, most of the fossils come from the eastern part of the country, like Queensland. And there, researchers dug up something really rare – a well-preserved dinosaur skull. The study shows that this bone belonged to the 4th discovered specimen of Titanosaur. This group includes those massive long-necked dinosaurs. They look like the Brachiosaurus, but some of them were even bigger, reaching 120 feet long. The skull, discovered in 2018, belongs to this guy, whose pronunciation is above my pay grade, and the research points out that it roamed the Earth around 98 million years ago. Thanks to this find, scientists were able to recreate for the very first time what its face might have looked like. Probably after checking out the illustration, they thought, hey, it looks a lot like its cousin. They were talking about another species of Titanosaur, this other unpronounceable guy. And guess where they used to live? Yep, in Argentina. So, this research also supports the theory that dinosaurs crossed between South America and Australia during the mid-Cretaceous period. Now, this wasn't the only secret buried in Queensland, though. In 2024, researchers working there discovered the fossilized remains of a new species of pterosaur, about 100 million years old. These creatures were the first vertebrates that could actually fly, existing alongside dinosaurs. They were massive, powerful predators, with wingspans of up to 36 feet. But these remains belong to a new species within the pterosaur group, which they have named Cunematata, or something similar. Compared to their cousins, they were on the smaller side, with a wingspan of about 15 feet. Still, that's bigger than a snowy albatross, the largest flying bird we have today. This species of pterosaurs were terrifying beasts, flying over the ocean to hunt for prey. Once they spotted their victim, they'd snap open their 60-centimeter jaws, filled with sharp spike-like teeth, and, well, I guess there was no escaping that. The last incredible discovery we're talking about today also comes from Queensland. For over 20 years, students walked past a plain-looking rock at Biloela State High School completely unaware that it held 66 dinosaur footprints, and they date back about 200 million years. These prints were made by a group of these Latin-named guys. They were small dinosaurs with 3 toes on each foot, and it seems like they were all over Queensland around that early Jurassic period. The rock they found at the school worked like a snapshot, giving us a better idea of what these dinosaurs were like and how they behaved. After taking a closer look, researchers found that the footprints came from 47 individual dinosaurs. This group was probably walking along or maybe crossing a waterway when their footprints got marked in the white clay. And the study also discovered that they were likely moving at less than 4 miles per hour at the time. So we only discovered those marks in Australia. but fossils of the same species found in other countries show that they had these long legs, a big chunky body, short arms, and this tiny head with a beak. But honestly, they don't sound as scary when you realize they only ate plants. Whew.
When you first see this creature, it may seem to you that this is a flying sapphire. The blue-banded bee is as beautiful as this gem. These flying beetles have turquoise stripes instead of yellow. Their huge green eyes resemble emeralds. And their thin brown wings look like layers of cellophane with engraved patterns. Appearance is not the only thing that distinguishes them from ordinary bees. The blue-banded ones are singles. They don't move in swarms and don't live in large nests. These beetles like settling in small burrows in the soil or crevices in rocks. Another cool difference between our blue guys and ordinary bees is their unique way of pollination. Scientists call it buzz pollination. The blue bee sits on the flower, holds it tightly, and begins to shake the whole body. It creates a series of small, fast vibrations. This way, the bee also shakes the flower, quickly and gently. These movements make the pollen move out of the anther. Then the bee stops and collects all this pollen. Some scientists think these bees prefer pollinating purple flowers. This helps the blue bees blend in with the plant and remain unnoticed by enemies. But this theory hasn't been proved yet. The blue-banded bees mainly inhabit the territory of Australia. They are an important element in the agriculture of this country. These bees work with tomatoes, cranberries, eggplants, blueberries, kiwi, and chili peppers. Ordinary bees can't pollinate most of those plants, but their blue relatives can. On a global scale, more than 8% of plants in the world need to be pollinated through buzz pollination. That's why farmers love and protect blue-banded bees so much. Wasps and bees are very similar in appearance. Sometimes they can be difficult to tell apart, but their lifestyle is totally different. Bees are quiet beetles that spend all their time pollinating plants, collecting nectar from flowers, and making honey. We can say that bees are small, powerful trucks, but wasps are racing supercars. They are more aggressive, much faster, and more maneuverable in the air. Their stings are more painful. Yes, they can also carry pollen from one plant to another and feed on nectar, but their main mission is to control the population of insect pests, such as aphids and some species of caterpillars. According to some estimates, wasps manage to get rid of more than 14,000 tons of insects in the UK alone during one summer. Imagine how much they do all over the world. Wasps are dangerous beetles, but among them, there is one kind that is distinguished by its peaceful nature and lifestyle. This is the mud dauber wasp. It also has a black and yellow coloring, but it looks more elegant. A swarm of regular wasps is controlled by the queen, but mud daubers are solitary creatures. They build a small nest of mud in which they live with their children. A mud dauber will bite only if it's in danger. Unlike other wasps, these insects only use their venom to paralyze spiders, flies, and caterpillars. Then, they bring them to their nest to feed their children. So don't be surprised if you see a large horde of paralyzed spiders inside the nest. There can be more than 500 bugs in one nest. When little wasps hatch from eggs, they immediately begin their feast. The most unfriendly wasp species is the hornet. They are also wasps, but bigger, angrier, and with an even more painful bite. Its bite is one of the most dangerous among all insects. This critter can grow to be the size of a thumb. That's 3 times as large as a regular bee. Hornets attack in a huge swarm and pose a great danger to any animal. To fight them, people wear thick protective suits that resemble spacesuits. But the worst thing is that hornets invade hives and reduce the bee population. This can lead to a catastrophe on a planetary scale, since bees pollinate more than half of all fruits, vegetables, grains, and nuts in the world. Look at this big buzzing bumblebee. There's something wrong with it. It lands on a flower. And wait a minute. This is not a bumblebee at all. It's some kind of green-orange beautiful beetle. Oh, now it takes off and looks like a bumblebee again. Meet the pellucid hawk moth. Thanks to its color and transparent wings, it creates the illusion of a bumblebee. The wings of most insects serve for thermoregulation. They warm their body. Other insects have wings that help them fight enemies. A butterfly manages to look like a large creature thanks to the pattern on its wings. Some insects communicate using vibrations created by their wings. Colored wings have many different purposes, but the pellucid hawk moth has transparent wings, and their main function is to avoid reflecting sunlight. These fast-moving transparent wings practically don't shine in the light and tone down the color of the beetle. Thanks to this, when the moth is flying, other insects perceive it as a bumblebee and are afraid to attack it. These bumblebee copycats are found in Africa, India, Southeast Asia, and Australia. At the beginning of life, they are bright green caterpillars that feed on coffee and pomegranate leaves. From afar, it may seem that a hamster is sitting on the trunk of a tree, but this is actually the southern flannel moth. It's large and covered with thick fur. Don't try and pet it if you don't want to go to a hospital. There are many poisonous thorns hidden inside this fur coat. Even a light prick can make you experience lots of unpleasant sensations. Other insects that pretend to be bees and wasps are hoverflies. They look like wasps, fly like wasps, and imitate a wasp's sting. But their coolest ability is copying bee buzzing. In reality, though, hoverflies are fragile, harmless creatures. Their ability to transform into bees is essential for their survival, and it works great. Many animals and insects are afraid to approach these skillful actors. But in the entire animal world, lyrebirds get the title of the most talented imitators. These small birds, with large, beautiful tails resembling a lyre, live in Australia. Imagine getting lost in a forest far away from a big city. Suddenly, you hear the sound of a chainsaw. You don't see people, but the sound is getting closer. Then you hear the clicking of a camera shutter, but there are no people with cameras around. Lyrebirds create all these sounds. Thanks to all the complex muscles of their syrinx, they can mimic the sound of almost anything. Some people heard these birds imitating human speech. Also, they are good forest designers. Female lyrebirds build domed nests on the ground, in stumps and caves. They usually lay one egg there and take care of the baby for the first 6 to 10 weeks. Let's go down from the sky to the ocean to see other tiny creatures. Meet blue-ringed octopus. This little guy looks so small and cute. Its bright neon color and blue rings are visible from afar. The octopus can easily fit in your palm, but it's better not to touch it. Meeting a great white shark may not be as dangerous as encountering this tiny creature. It's one of the most treacherous sea inhabitants in the world because of its venom. One bite can knock down a huge African elephant. The octopus is much more dangerous than a king cobra or a black widow spider because its bite often goes unnoticed. You may not feel or see when it stings you, and when you realize that something is wrong, it may be too late. Also, there's no antidote to the blue-ringed octopus's venom. The creature's salivary glands are home to bacteria that produce this venom. The same substance is found in the venom of pufferfish. When it enters the human body, it paralyzes the entire nervous system. The lungs stop contracting to supply the body with oxygen. The only good news is that this octopus is unlikely to attack first. The last recorded case when this creature charged at people was in the 60s. The blue-ringed octopus lives in the Pacific and Indian Oceans, from the coast of Japan to Australia. They spend most of their time in tide pools and coral reefs. Now we move to the hot sands of the southeastern U.S. states. You can find fire ants here. Outwardly, they don't differ much from regular bugs. But people call them fire ants because of their bite. Their poison resembles a flame. You're likely to feel the bite site burning. Therefore, it's better not to touch them and go away before any of these ants crawl into your pants.
Once upon a time, a young boy was digging a ginormous hole on the beach. But then, disaster struck! The hole caved in, and he found himself stuck up to his neck in the sand like a human popsicle. Thankfully, his parents were able to keep the sand out of his mouth. Emergency services swooped into the beach soon after. After some effort, the boy was taken out. Experts say sand is tricky and can be super unstable when messed with. So, the moral of the story is, go ahead and have fun on the beach. But if you're planning on digging a hole big enough to fit your entire body, be mindful of the size and location. It turns out that this is not a one-time incident. Making deep holes can lead to serious injuries, or even worse. According to a study, there have been over 50 incidents of sand hole collapses worldwide, with many of them resulting in fatalities. We don't want to be the next headline for a preventable tragedy. So, here are some helpful tips from experts to keep you safe and sound. Never dig a hole deeper than the knee level of the smallest person in your group, and always fill in any hole you make before you leave, day or night. Lastly, avoid digging near the dune line or water line where emergency vehicles travel. Since we started with holes on the beach, we might as well continue with sinkholes. Sinkholes, also known as snake holes or swallow holes, are like chameleons on Earth's surface. They can be big, they can be small, and they can pop up seemingly out of nowhere. It's like playing a game of whack-a-mole, but instead of moles, it's sinkholes. These sneaky things form over the years. They require specific conditions and processes. So, what's the deal with sinkholes? Well, they're basically natural depressions or holes in Earth's surface caused by karst processes. And what are karst processes, you may ask? They occur when bedrocks are soluble. It's as if rocks have a secret weakness, and water is their kryptonite. Now, even though sinkholes form slowly, they're like that one friend who's always full of surprises. They can be unpredictable and show up when you least expect them. Interesting fact time. This giant pit is over 2,165 feet deep. It's the biggest and deepest sinkhole in the world. Some researchers think a meteorite might have caused it, but others believe it formed over the course of 128,000 years as underground rivers eroded the surrounding limestone. Either way, it's pretty mind-boggling. The locals have known about it for ages, but it wasn't until 1994 that the rest of the world learned about it thanks to a group of British explorers. This massive hole is home to over 1,200 plant and animal species, including rare ones like the ginkgo tree and the clouded leopard. A waterfall cascades into the pit in the rainy season, feeding an underground river and cave system below. It's like a whole other world out there. Next, we have hailstorms. Think of them as nature's way of saying, "Heads up!" in the most intense way possible. Hail is like frozen rain on steroids, and when it starts pelting down, you better take cover. Hailstorms typically last for about 15 minutes, but in that short time, they can cause serious damage to buildings, cars, and crops. They can even knock out power lines and bring down trees. And if you're unlucky to be caught out in the open during a hailstorm, you might find yourself feeling like a human pinball. Here are some of the things that make hailstorms a real bummer. Watch out, planes. If you think turbulence is bad, wait until you encounter a hailstorm in the air. A plane crashed during a hailstorm in northern Mexico in 2018. Thankfully, everyone on board made it out safely. Phew! Hail is not just a danger to airplanes, but also to cars on the road. Imagine driving down the highway and then boom! Your windshield shatters into tiny pieces. You can barely see where you're going, and the road is slippery. Farmers have it rough during a hailstorm too. Those strong winds and giant ice pellets can destroy crops, leaving behind a trail of broken plants and stripped bark. All that hard work goes down the drain in a matter of minutes, leading to significant losses. What if it's summertime? Who doesn't love soaking up the sun, playing in the sand, and catching some waves? Oops, rip currents. Those powerful, narrow channels of fast-moving water are everywhere along the east, Gulf, and west coasts, and the Great Lakes shores. They can move at speeds of up to 8 feet per second. People who panic in rip currents often try to swim straight back to shore, which is the wrong move and could tire you out, or even worse. So, what should you do if you get caught in a rip current? First, stay calm and don't fight it. Instead, swim parallel to the shore and then back to land at an angle. A little clarification. Rip currents and rip tides are not the same thing. Rip tides are a specific type of current that happens when tidal water moves quickly through places like inlets and harbors. Landslides are another type of danger that can catch you off guard. Mountains look like they're stable, rock-solid things that have been around forever. But don't let appearances fool you. Landslides can happen anywhere, at any time. Basically, landslides happen when a big pile of dirt, rocks, and other debris gets all shaken up and starts tumbling down a hill. Sometimes it's because of rain. Sometimes it's because of something like an earthquake. And sometimes it's just because the ground decides it's had enough. Mother Nature's got some more tricks up her sleeve. First up, we've got heat bursts. This weather phenomenon is hotter than a jalapeno. Now, these aren't your everyday thunderstorms. For a heat burst to occur, the atmospheric conditions have to be very specific. We need dry air, high altitude descents, and an absence of evaporated precipitation. When all these factors come together, the result is a heat burst that can reach speeds so fast that you'll feel like you're riding a rocket to the sun. And not only is the air scorching hot, but it's also so dry that it evaporates moisture right out of anything it touches, including poor defenseless vegetation. Have you ever heard of a fire whirl, also known as a fire devil or fire tornado? It's like a swirling vortex of fire and ash that can eat up debris and combustible gases. Think of it as a mini tornado that's fueled by a raging fire. These things usually start with a swirl of wind, which you can see thanks to all the smoke. They happen when rising heat and windy conditions team up to create whirling eddies of air. These eddies can sometimes get so intense that they form a tornado-like vortex that's hungry for anything and everything in its path. Now, sometimes people call a fire whirl by its other names, like firenado, fire swirl, or fire twister. But those terms usually refer to a different thing, where a fire is so intense that it creates an actual tornado. Fire whirls are a little different because their vortex doesn't usually go from the ground all the way up to the clouds. And even if they do, they're not usually considered a classic tornado because they don't form in the same way. These things can get pretty hot too. We're talking up to 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Fire whirls are more likely to happen during wildfires or firestorms when there's enough wind to create big vortices. The biggest ones can be massive. They can even uproot trees that are 49 feet tall or more. There you have 7 sneaky natural phenomena. Have you ever encountered any of these? Comment below and let us know.
Floods, tornadoes, tsunamis, hurricanes, yikes. All these natural disasters can get extremely dangerous, but we're kind of familiar with them. But how about a natural disaster that has never happened before, but could occur any moment now? It might be a super eruption. That's what happens when a supervolcano erupts. You might know that Yellowstone Park is located on top of a supervolcano. The last massive eruption there happened about 664,000 years ago, and the one before that, approximately 1.3 million years ago. If we do the math, we'll understand that the next eruption might be due anytime soon. There's no strong evidence that the supervolcano is waking up or preparing for an eruption, but what would it be like if it did happen? Months before the eruption, small-scale earthquakes would become more frequent and more powerful in the area. Not long before the eruption, the growing pressure would push up the ground over the volcano, creating a dome. Narrow cracks would open along the edges of this dome. The magma would then start rising toward the surface, and then the eruption would kick off. A massive column of lava and ash would shoot up into the air to a height of over 16 miles. The volcano would keep pumping ash for days on end. The air in that area would heat up to 570 degrees Fahrenheit. For all living creatures, ash fallout would be one of the most dangerous consequences of the eruption. Buildings and trees would start collapsing under the weight of this dense substance. It would only take a couple of days for a 10-foot layer of ash to cover the territory of about 50 miles around the center of the eruption. After the ash got into the stratosphere, the temperatures all over the world would start to drop. The eruption would also be rich in sulfur, and this element is an effective sun blocker. That's why it would soon get so cold that there would be no summer in the whole world for the next several years. The monsoon seasons would change. It would be hard for animals to find food and clean water. Well now, how about a gamma ray burst? You don't stumble across this kind of radiation in your everyday life. A gamma ray burst occurs when two neutron stars collide. The collapse of a massive star can produce it too. Gamma rays could present a serious danger to Earth. If a gamma ray burst happened close to our home planet, it could rip our ozone layer away. After that, we would be left unprotected from the sun's ultraviolet radiation. Plus, gamma rays could also produce ground ozone. This kind of ozone could seep into the ocean since it's water-soluble, and that would lead to a mass extinction of marine life. Plants wouldn't survive this disaster either. Now, come to think of it, giant sinkholes could swallow entire communities. One of such sinkholes opened up in the city of New York. It pulled a parked van into the earth. That happened in the summer of 2022. And it wasn't the only sinkhole to appear in that area. Local inhabitants reported about 4,000 sinkholes all over the city. This kind of problem is also very common in Florida, and it's much more serious than it may sound. Sinkholes open all of a sudden, pulling down everything and everyone that happens to be nearby. Sinkholes appear all over the world, which makes them a global problem. They're totally unpredictable and form without warning. Luckily, experts know what causes them. In some areas, there are vast areas of groundwater. But during droughts, this water dries up. This creates large empty caverns, and after heavy rains, the surface over such a cavern can collapse, creating a sinkhole within minutes. Now, what if we came across a wandering black hole? You might know that a black hole is a region in space where gravity is so powerful that not even light can escape its clutches. Luckily, the nearest one to us is 1,500 light-years away. Nothing to worry about, right? Until you find out about wandering black holes. Now, things get definitely way creepier. If such a black hole entered the solar system, Earth would be doomed. We wouldn't stand a chance against this space monster. In 2012, 13 wandering black holes were spotted not so far away from our planet. But worry not. Not far away, in space terms, means around 1 billion light-years away. So we've got some time left. Plus, the possibility of such a disaster is very, very low. Another natural disaster we haven't experienced yet is a megaflood. It's never happened before, but the changes in climate do make for a risky potential. It could start, let's say, in California. This state experienced some really bad flooding in the past. One of such floods stretched up to 60 miles across and 300 miles long. If a similar disaster happened these days, it would cause $1 trillion worth of damage. It would also uproot millions of people. Now let's talk about a hypercane. Judging from the name, this natural disaster might get extreme. A hypercane is a theoretical hurricane of unsurpassed power. It would occur if the ocean became overheated as a result of climate change, or because of a massive volcanic eruption. In any case, these conditions could create a hurricane that would stretch way beyond the lower stratosphere. And as you may guess, regular hurricanes don't do that. The hypercane speed would reach 500 miles per hour. The pressure inside would be low enough not to let the hypercane to wear out as quickly as other hurricanes. The hypercane could last for weeks on end. But the worst thing? It could damage or even destroy part of Earth's ozone layer, and the hole could be the size of the entire North American continent. Now, this disaster did happen before. About 66 million years ago, I bet you know what I'm hinting at. Yep, that very meteor that supposedly wiped out dinosaurs off the face of the Earth. This 7-mile-wide space visitor was traveling at 67,000 miles per hour. As a result of the collision, 75% of all life on the planet disappeared, and winter reigned on Earth for 18 months. Want to know a secret? Meteors strike Earth all the time. Even more of them barely miss our planet. But it's also very hard to predict meteor strikes. Scientists miss a lot of them until they just nearly miss us. That's why experts are working on an early warning system that could prevent disasters. It could make meteor impacts less catastrophic, or at least allow people time to evacuate. It could also be our very own sun that would be responsible for another natural disaster. I'm talking about a massive solar flare. On the scale of damage to society, few catastrophes can compare to this event. It wouldn't destroy buildings like a tsunami or an earthquake. Neither would it end lives in the same way a supervolcano or meteor would. But it would cripple our entire way of life by destroying the whole electronic infrastructure of Earth. The cost of this disaster would reach trillions of dollars. It'd cause other infrastructures to fail. Communication, medicine, transportation, banking systems. Those would tumble like dominoes, and it would be incredibly hard to recover them. Earth would be left without electricity for years. There would be no electric light, no computers, no phones. Water supply systems would be out of order. There would be no food in supermarkets. There would be no electricity, and people wouldn't be able to reboot the already broken power grids. In 1859, people all over the world woke up in the middle of the night. It was as light as during the day. The skies were illuminated with auroras, red, green, purple. They appeared even in the regions where no one had seen them before, like the Bahamas, Jamaica, or Hawaii. Telegraphs got electrically charged, even though they were disconnected. In many areas, fires started. That was when technology barely existed. But imagine the avalanche of problems a solar flare could cause today.
Have you ever wondered what's inside of a kangaroo's pouch? Maybe they're saving some snacks for later. Maybe it's for their house keys. Or perhaps they're used to their part-time job transporting people to work every day. The short answer is kangaroos use the pouch to carry their young, or joey. They need the bag because after a short gestation period of up to 36 days, the joey is born and crawls into the pouch for their continued development, where other mammals would not. Once he is born, it's the size of a jelly bean. Although he is deaf and blind, it has an acute sense of smell and finds its way into the warm and protected pouch. The joey will then attach itself to the mother to drink milk, where it receives nutrients, and from there it will live, grow, and develop for the outside world for the next 4 to 6 months. Once the joey develops enough, it can leave the pouch and stretch its legs to adapt to the world outside. But it will still go back to feed inside the pouch for a further 6 to 12 months. These time frames vary depending on the types of species of kangaroos. There are 4 different types. The red kangaroo, the largest of all the kangaroos and all terrestrial animals in Australia, is found throughout the mainland, though generally in deserts and open grasslands. Nicknamed the Big Red, it can stand as tall as 6 feet and weigh up to 200 pounds. The eastern grey is mainly typical of the eastern coasts. These are the second largest, with a height of 5 feet tall and a weight of up to 180 pounds. The Antilopean kangaroo, the smallest of the 4, is located in the far northern tropical regions. Their height reaches up to 4 feet tall, and they can weigh as much as 110 pounds. And lastly, you'll find the western grey in the southwestern and southern areas of the continent, weighing up to 120 pounds while standing up to 4 feet tall. Of all the different sizes, their most notable ability is to leap forward in a bouncing motion, covering vast distances. The Big Red can cover up to a staggering 30 feet in just one bounce. Although, what makes the kangaroo so unique isn't uncommon in Australia. They share evolutionary traits with other classifications of macropods. Wallabies, wallaroos, quokkas, and pademelons are distant cousins of the kangaroo, with several species in each classification. They all come in many different sizes and live in the unique areas that they've adapted to throughout Australia and New Guinea. Although marsupials were once more common throughout the rest of the world, it's unclear where they originated. The old fossils of marsupials were found in North America, but it is clear that the marsupials slowly made their way down under and came through South America, across Antarctica, until finally into Australia. Of course, we're keeping in mind that this was when the continents were all still attached. Once making it to Australia, they quickly adapted without competition from the other animals. Some other mammals made it to Australia around the same time. The bat family and the rodent family, it's not surprising that mites and rats had managed to make it to Australia before humans. Although Australia's climate would have been very different from what we know of it today, marsupials had adapted quickly to the changes. There has been some debate about the unique characteristics of the marsupial were better suited for the drastic changes in weather as opposed to other animals. The smaller gestation period allows their young to feed on milk a lot sooner. Marsupial milk has growth and immunity factors greater than other mammals' milk, which could be beneficial in a harsher environment, which is why marsupials are more prominent in Australia. The kangaroo has explicitly adapted over the ages. Their success in adaptation reflects on their current population of around 48 million throughout Australia, easily outnumbering the human population. Although their success is not entirely due to their unique traits, it's mainly due to the lack of predators. The dingo. The mammal migrated to Australia approximately 8,000 years ago, but their numbers are controlled around most of Australia. And then there was also the thylacine, also known as the Tasmanian tiger, which slowly disappeared from the mainland since humans arrived around 50,000 years ago. And it's estimated they disappeared completely around 4,000 years ago, allowing marsupials like the kangaroo to thrive. The fascinating thing about thylacine is that it provides an excellent example of convergent evolution. It is the process where animals not closely related independently evolve similar traits. The thylacine and the gray wolf come from entirely different parts of the planet and only share a common ancestor that existed at least 160 million years ago, yet they evolved similarly. Other marsupials fit the category of convergent evolution. The marsupial sugar glider, which is like the placental flying squirrel, the hopping mouse, which is like the North American kangaroo rat. There are types of marsupials and other moles. The Tasmanian devil is like the hyena and wolverine, and the wombat has resemblances to the groundhog and marmot. The possums and their cousin, the opossum in North America, has evolved to have opposable thumbs, a feature found in primates. Hedgehogs and porcupines, mammals completely unrelated to Australia, have their unique spikes, but share this similarity with the echidna. The echidna is another mammal altogether and not a marsupial. It is of the monotreme order. The echidna is one of the only two left in the monotreme mammals. Unlike other mammals, monotremes don't produce live young, but lay eggs, of which their young, or puggle, hatches just 10 days after being laid. But like all other mammals, the puggle will drink milk from their mother. A further example of convergent evolution is with the koala, which has evolved to have fingerprints, like primates. The koala has adapted through the warming of the weather in Australia. As the climate became drier, there was a distinct change in the fauna throughout the continent. Eucalyptus trees became more prominent as they more easily adapted to drier climates. Over 70% of native forestry in Australia is currently eucalyptus. The eucalyptus leaves, or gum leaves, are deficient in nutrition. They are so low in nutritional value that they shouldn't be the main diet. But the koala took advantage of this uncontested food and adapted over time, and now they only eat them, and they'll gorge themselves up to 6 times per day. It ensures that they need to sleep up to 20 hours each day, but although they sleep a lot, they're very safe high above the eucalyptus trees. The animal world in Australia is strange as it is diverse. But even those natives in this land have their own stories that make them even more bizarre. Indigenous Australians have stories from the Dreamtime, telling tales of weird animals that existed. One mythological animal was the bunyip. It has been told in tales as a beast that lurked within the swamps, rivers, and lakes. Although commonly known as the bunyip, it's also referred by many different names throughout the country. Before Europeans arrived in Australia, there existed around 250 languages within the native population. Each language has a similar story of a beast that lived within the water, which would provide a valuable lesson to young children to be careful around swamps and rivers. The bunyip's various forms, scales, fur, or feathers, sizes as small as a dog and as large as a buffalo. Some are unimaginably strange in appearance, but others weren't too dissimilar to actual animals like the crocodile. A precursor to how mythological creatures like the bunyip were created had likely originated from bones and fossils of existing animals. For example, in Europe, stories about dragons are argued that they probably originated from finding dinosaur fossils. Fossils are the likely foundations for the stories based around the infamous bunyip, animals from the megafauna period, which around 2.5 million years ago saw the largest of them all. This period ended about 20,000 years ago. Variations of the bunyip coincide with animals that once lived during this period. The Thylacoleo, also known as the marsupial lion, was a large and powerful carnivorous marsupial. The Diprotodon, which resembled a giant wombat, weighed around 6,000 pounds and was 10 feet long. A further version was of a beaked bunyip covered in feathers related to the Dromornithidae, a bird standing at 10 feet tall. Each of these was from a time when megafauna was more common, and humans lived among them for a short period. Although the age of megafauna in Australia has long passed, there are still animals that adapted to the changes in the drying continent, the new species introduction, and even the involvement of humans. The four kangaroos, the red eastern, the western grey, and the antilopine, are still living reminders of the age of megafauna.
So many asteroids pass through our solar system, and we don't even know about it. Those are rocky pieces of material left over from the time when our solar system was forming, about 4.6 billion years ago. They move around the sun, but not in the way planets do. We're talking about true rebels that prefer to follow some pretty strange paths. Plus, they spin in different ways as they travel between planets and other space objects. And the majority of them come from the main asteroid belt that's located between Jupiter and Mars. Most stay there. But Jupiter has quite a strong gravity, so it can push some of those flying rocks in different directions, and towards us too. They're sometimes round, and sometimes they have odd shapes with pits and holes from all that crashing into other space rocks. As we currently know, there are more than 1 million of them in the main asteroid belt, and that's all good until some of them move in our direction. NASA keeps an eye on them, so we know everything's fine, at least for now. But that wasn't always the case with our beloved home planet. If Earth could talk, it would probably share so many crazy asteroid stories. We're talking about those space rocks that left impact craters we call domes. They have a specific shape with a raised center, similar to when you throw a pebble in a pond and see some water splashing upward. But we'll never be able to learn about many others. I know this raised center sounds like something you're supposed to see right away, especially if an asteroid that once slammed into the surface was big. But we're talking about millions and millions of years of erosion, so wind, water, and even gravity do what they do best and erase traces. They wear down impact domes, and some sites even end up hidden under layers of rock and dirt, or they disappear forever because Earth's tectonic plates keep moving around. Check out the Moon. It's experienced many collisions too, but over there, there's no ocean or tectonic plates moving around, or even wind to slowly, through millions of years, erase craters from its face. Basically, its entire history is written on its surface. But Earth has its own forces that can erase such places as the Vedafort impact structure and the Chicxulub crater. You know, the famous one that wiped out the dinosaurs? Luckily, scientists have new methods to find ancient craters. They often focus on the mess impacts made, which means the materials they threw around. And the Australian continent is especially interesting since we're talking about a playground for asteroid hits. By that, I mean ancient supercontinent Gondwana that dominated the South hundreds of millions of years ago. Experts know about 38 impacts, plus they speculate about 43 more. Some structures are relatively small, while others are big and completely hidden. And recently, a scientist named Tony Yates has discovered strange underground magnetic patterns in New South Wales, Australia. Yay! New clues of a giant asteroid impact! And when I say giant, I really mean it. It's a structure 323 miles in diameter. This might be the largest impact site ever found. This spot is called the Deniliquin structure. Its magnetic patterns show characteristic ripples around the center, like when a rock hits the water. There are also fractures that go outward from the center. And it seems rocks from inside Earth ended up pushed into these fractures. That's a typical story for big asteroid impacts. This structure was probably located in eastern Gondwana hundreds of millions of years ago, way before it split into several continents, including Australia. At the moment, all we know about this crater is what we see on the surface. To find more information about this collision and get some proof, we'll have to drill into the ground. An asteroid this big is definitely not a joke. It could have caused a massive ice age and maybe even wiped out around 85% of species, even more than the asteroid that ended dinosaurs. In 4.5 billion years, which is how long our planet has existed, it's been punched by hundreds of big asteroids. But that doesn't mean every space rock that enters our atmosphere really makes it all the way to the ground. Most of those that manage to pass the atmosphere are relatively small, for instance, 3 feet across. That's good for us because any space rock that's less than 82 feet in diameter most likely won't make it past our planet's atmosphere. Since these space rocks come towards us very fast, they heat up the gases in the atmosphere, which burns them away. By the way, once cosmic intruders enter our atmosphere, they turn into meteors. And in most cases, they don't cause much damage, if any, as they fall down. But we used to have way larger things flying around and crashing into Earth. At least 190 of them have left scars you can still see today. One of the really big ones is in South Africa. It's 99 miles wide. It's actually the largest. At least that's what scientists think at the moment because they still need to check as many details as possible about this new crater in Australia. This one in South Africa formed about 2 billion years ago, and an asteroid that created it was probably larger than the one that had wiped dinosaurs away. And when an asteroid is bigger than 0.6 miles, it can have really big effects across the world. This impact was so strong that it could have caused fires everywhere and thrown lots of dust into the air. And when you have so much dust in the atmosphere, the climate on the planet can change for months or even years. Then we also have the most popular asteroid that made a giant hole we today call the Chicxulub crater. You know the story. It crashed into our planet 66 million years ago when dinosaurs were wandering around, catching food, falling in love. Basically, just doing their thing. The crash itself didn't erase them right away. It threw a lot of debris into space, and when it fell back to Earth, fires and flames were everywhere. The hit also produced a big cloud of dust that covered the planet for years. This cloud blocked the sunlight, which harmed plants and entire food chains. Even those dinosaurs that survived the crash and such difficult conditions had a hard time finding food, so they didn't make it. At least they left us many fossils and turned into the inspiration for movies and stories. A long time ago in Canada, something big crashed into our planet and left a big hole we today know as the Sudbury Basin. People used to think it was an asteroid, but now some experts think it might have been a giant comet made up of a mix of ice and rocks. The hole is almost gone now because of weather conditions though. But people still get to mine iron and nickel there, and at the same time find the leftovers of whatever space object fell there. If you move deep in southern India, you'll find a big hole called Lonar Crater. Locals stumbled upon it 200 years ago and believed it might be from a volcano. But now we know it's a trace from a meteor that crashed into the ground about 35 to 50,000 years ago. What's so special about this crater is that it's the only one known to have formed in a type of rock called basalt. Around the crater, there are hills covered in trees, and animals like peafowls and gazelles live there. Birds also like to visit the lake near the crater during the winter. And the lake itself is quite interesting too. It can turn pink because of all those tiny organisms that live there. But this color change doesn't last long.
There are many miles of undiscovered areas beneath the crust we can't even come close to. Scientists found what appears to be underground mountains buried inside the mantle. Our planet is divided into 3 layers: the crust, the mantle, and the core. The crust is where 8 billion people, trillions of trees, and millions of animals live and thrive. There are also different types of crust in the land and the ocean. The oceanic crust contains unique rocks and is denser than the land crust. We all see how the Earth is divided and color-coded to show the crust, mantle, and core in textbooks. But there are also special layers in between that not everyone talks about. The mantle is divided into the upper and lower part, which is the transition zone. Since the mantle acts as the geological recycling center, the plate tectonics don't only move side to side, but up and down. It's actually why all the volcanoes appeared. The magma spews out to the surface or even underwater, and then sinks back down and repeats. The transitions go down 250 miles and then 410 miles. And in this bottom layer, scientists keep discovering the hidden landscapes. The mountains in the mantle are more rugged and much larger than the ones on the crust. Scientists found a mountain range with peaks higher than Mount Everest. Some of them are as high as 600 miles. When the continents were still landlocked together, there may have been some hidden lands now underwater. Theories suggest that Iceland used to be part of a larger microcontinent, Icelandia, which connected present-day Iceland with Greenland and Scandinavia. The idea digs even deeper to a greater Icelandia, which includes Britain. But after the split, these bigger lands sunk with everything in it. There are also theories about New Zealand being part of Zealandia, a hidden microcontinent within the same region. So it could be that these mountains used to be part of old Earth that are underground over the billions of years of natural occurrences. But still, it isn't very likely. One theory is that these underground mountain ranges could be leftover slabs of rock that descended from the surface to the transition zone from the moving of the tectonic plates. As they sink, the large pieces break down into smaller ones, and as they compile over the millions of years, they form what appears to be underground mountains. Since the mantle is the geologic recycling zone, it's likely that the rocks down there used to be part of the surface. They weren't large pieces of land that got hidden, just like dogs hide bones in the garden, but it takes way more time to hide mountains. Some parts of the mantle appear to be smooth, while others aren't so much. The parts that have a cluster of rocks could contain hidden elements in the underground mountains. The smoother parts don't have much seismic or volcanic activity, while the rough parts do. The best way to study those underground landscapes is to wait for an earthquake or a volcano eruption to happen. Seismologists can observe the Earth's interior with special scanners, just like doctors use ultrasound to examine a patient. They can even see minor details and not huge chunks of rocks. A strong enough earthquake can send shock waves to the Earth's interior, even through the core and back up to the surface. Depending on where they occur, seismologists can observe and study the intensity of the waves as they move back and forth. On smooth rocks, the waves can travel in a straight line, but once they reach a rough area, the waves tend to scatter. The temperature and composition of the materials can make the waves move faster or slower. But this info isn't exactly accurate and won't contribute a lot to the actual data of the underground mountains. So by analyzing the scattered waves on ships and utilizing the Earth's magnetic field, scientists can figure out everything they need to know. But these studies are only good enough to figure out the interior in today's state, not how the Earth changed over the past 4.5 billion years. However, scientists are certain that mantle material still dates back to the beginning of Earth's original formation. The question, why not just dig a hole to the center of the Earth and see what's going on down there, might seem logical. The deepest hole humans have dug so far is the Kola Deep borehole in the Russian Arctic that goes more than 40,000 feet deep. The locals claim they can actually hear screaming coming from below. It took almost 20 years to drill as far as they went, but it's literally merely scratching the surface of what's underneath. They dug about 1/3 of the crust, which is only 0.2% to the center of the Earth. Getting there is beyond us, just like trying to reach the sun. No human can handle the amount of pressure down there. Going down the Mariana Trench, the Earth's deepest point, requires special gear to withstand all the immense pressure. It'll cost a fortune to build that tech to get us to the center of our planet. Evidence of diamonds buried deep in Brazil shows that everything we do on the crust's surface can affect things miles below, even towards the mantle. Scientists dug up 6 diamonds that could hold tiny mineral grains. As they're called in the mineral world, these inclusions have a chemistry composition where they originated deep in the Earth. Typical diamonds are formed at depths less than 125 miles in the upper mantle, where it's extremely hot. The high pressure and boiling temperature down crystallizes carbon and creates diamonds. But humans can't dig all the way down there. They mine them by detecting where a deep volcanic eruption happened that expelled these diamonds to the surface. These eruptions occurred millions of years ago, when dinosaurs used to rule the Earth. They shot out the diamonds that were in the mantle and are now embedded within the cooled down volcanic material. That's where people mine them. But these special diamonds found in Brazil originated from a much deeper point than usual, which can further help scientists study the depths of the Earth. They can extract these inclusions and analyze them in a lab to tell where exactly these minerals come from. In the lab, scientists study inclusions, each just 15 to 40 microns wide, less than a quarter width of a human hair. They found out that they contained many types of minerals found in volcanic rock on the surface. The carbon composition of the magma from the surface is much different than the ones deep in the Earth. What's crazy is that these diamonds with special inclusions can only be found 435 miles in the lower mantle. With only a few samples of them found, we don't know what else lies beneath us. It's possible that those mountain ranges underground, taller than Mount Everest, can have traces of diamonds all around, which would prompt excavators to dig them up and saturate the market with them. These diamonds are less flawed than the usual ones and might even come in many sizes. It's possible to see diamonds as large as a car or as small as a grain of rice. There might even be new diamonds with different chemical compositions than the ones we find near the surface. The largest diamond in the world is the Cullinan, which can fit in the palm of your hand. It weighs around 1.3 pounds and is 3,100 carats. It was found in 1905 in South Africa. For anything to exist on Earth, you need carbon. In a nutshell, the carbon cycle is when plants and algae release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere or dissolved in water through photosynthesis. It's converted into carbohydrates and stored as fat. Later on, carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere through breathing, which the plants benefit from, and the cycle goes on. Scientists claim that there might even be a carbon cycle in Earth's interior. The oceanic crust has a lot of carbon sediment that could mix with the upper and lower mantle layer. But there still isn't enough evidence to support this. The deep diamonds might be the key to popping open that theory. Only time will tell. There's not much to do in Antarctica except scientific work. You could check out the wildlife, like some cute penguins and seals, and you'd get to see the occasional whale swimming around. Antarctica is one of the biggest lands out there that's only inhabited by scientists and researchers from all over the world. These scientists dug a hole through some pretty thick ice to study the ancient air and how the atmosphere cleans itself. They used a special drill and dug a clean cylindrical hole 450 feet below the surface. Some of this ice can be up to 800,000 years old and is a good indicator of what the climate was like in the past. It's like checking out tree rings to determine how old a certain tree is, except it's more complicated than that. After the effortless digging, they decided to drop some ice to the bottom of the hole to see what would happen next. They heard some really unusual sounds. It felt like being on a spaceship traveling through a bunch of obstacles with many rocks smashing into each other. The pitches changed over the quick descent of the block of ice, ranging from high pitch and ending with a low heartbeat-like sound. The scientists were puzzled when they first heard this and dropped some more ice, only to find out that the same type of sounds were being produced, just in different variations. They couldn't tell what was down there, and, more importantly, why these kinds of sounds were produced. Antarctica boasts quite a few volcanoes, many of which are under super thick sheets of ice. Scientists discovered 91 volcanoes and claimed there could be more, potentially making it the most extensive volcanic region in the world. While they were doing regular scientific research, they came across many unmistakable large cone-shaped figures underground. Some were as deep as 2 miles in the ice. Some of the peaks were over 3,000 feet tall and dozens of miles across. But on the surface, it's as plain as a sheet of paper. They may have dropped that block of ice inside an actual volcano that they were standing on, but it's unlikely. Even though the underground volcano presence was discovered by accident, there's a small chance they were actually standing on one where they had their workstation set up. It's more likely that they worked in an area where studying ancient climates is easier and less dangerous than other places. They collect ice samples and study them in a lab. It's like discovering a prehistoric insect embedded in amber millions of years ago when dinosaurs used to roam the land. But instead of little bugs, scientists study ancient dust, air bubbles, sea salts, volcanic ash, and anything else that may have come from the environment. They can practically tell how the climate was during that time. These ice samples might show that Antarctica's western ice sheet melted when the Earth's climate warmed up. If it did, then it's likely to happen again. That would mean sea levels rising, affecting coastal cities and small remote islands. But scientists aren't sure it's true, despite some evidence to back it up. The process of studying ice samples can take a week or even a year, depending on what they find. They crush or melt the sample bit by bit. And like those tree rings, the deeper the layer, the further we go back in time. In order to study ancient bubbles trapped in ice, researchers have to crush the samples under a vacuum hood to keep the air out while extracting the air and putting it in vials. There are various instruments and devices to study the ice samples, but because it's so sensitive to damage, each measurement must be in a clean room setting so that nothing gets compromised. The scientists have to wear proper bodysuits and many layers of gloves and constantly get ventilated. Even something as tiny and insignificant as a fingerprint can ruin a sample. They look for certain patterns to see changes in the atmosphere's composition and temperature. But dropping a few blocks of ice down a hole wouldn't be so bad. The reason why it made such a peculiar sound is the same reason why a moving car sounds different when it's honking than when it's stationary. The scientific word for it is the Doppler effect. It's an obvious change in the frequency of a wave with respect to an observer who is moving relative to the wave source. The effect doesn't mean the frequency of the sound changes, it just shifts. And this can be said about other types of waves, like water and light. But sound waves are the most popular ones when it comes to the Doppler effect. So, when the scientists dropped the ice block down the bottom of the hole, the sound waves traveled back up and bounced around the narrow tube where they drilled. That's why they got the pew-pew sound. Let's not forget that this ice block traveled 450 feet beneath us. Oil ships dig holes in the oceanic crust that go thousands of feet beneath the Earth. The Kola Super Deep Borehole in Russia is the deepest hole ever made by humans. It goes more than 40,000 feet below the surface and took almost 20 years to reach 7.5 miles. Below it is only half the distance to the mantle. In terms of the whole Earth, this very deep hole is literally scratching the surface. This wasn't a hole to dig for oil, and wasn't in the ocean either. The drilling was stopped in 1992 when the engineers found out that the temperatures were 100 degrees Fahrenheit higher than they predicted. And then it was abandoned, and it's just been a barren hole now. But that's the closest we've dug to the center of the planet. The scary thing is that some of the workers on the site could hear voices coming from within. All the way in Yemen, an ancient hole exists in Barhout, in the east of the country in the middle of the desert. It's actually closer to Oman than to the capital Sana'a. This hole has puzzled experts and locals. Unlike the holes in Russia and Antarctica, this wasn't man-made. Or was it? It's been around for many years, and the locals try to steer away from it. They don't even like talking about it, since they claim it brings bad luck to those around it, or to whoever utters its name. They claim it was created as a prison for spirits, but many rule that out. The hole is 98 feet wide and somewhere between 330 to 650 feet deep. You can also hear strange sounds coming from the inside. But according to some scientists, the well has little to no ventilation and barely has any oxygen down there. So it's unlikely that anyone or anything lives down there. The Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench caught some low-pitched grumble sounds in March of 2016. Some of these grumbles were followed by screeches. They caught these sounds in a span of weeks, using a titanium-encased microphone so that the immense pressure of the lowest point on Earth wouldn't crush it. They had to lower it slowly as well, since it's 1,000 times the atmospheric pressure at sea level. For 23 whole days, the microphone recorded typical sounds of whales passing by and boats sailing across from above, and even rumbles of nearby earthquakes, but they still couldn't determine what caused those initial sounds. The researchers couldn't understand if the noise from the bottom of the Mariana Trench was caused by humans or was natural. They also wanted to know if these sounds affected marine life, like dolphins and whales that rely on echolocation. They still can't figure it out, but scientists estimate that the ocean is about 10 times noisier than it was 50 years ago. With technological developments in shipping, submarines, and underwater construction, the ocean will only get louder with time. Northern lights come with sounds, which nobody talks about. They're usually audible when the auroras are at their most powerful presence. Scientists were always puzzled as to what caused the faint popping and crackling, even though they were very far above us. They used some special microphones and found out that the sounds came just 230 feet above us, which is pretty low. They're caused by electrical charges gaining power in a specific region of the auroras. The electrical charges are disturbed by magnetic storms that fire up the northern lights. As a result, some tiny sparks are released into the atmosphere, causing the faint crackling and popping noise.
Food is essential, right? Good news, if you somehow find yourself in the middle of the ocean, you won't starve there. Almost all seawater fish can be eaten raw, just like sushi. Parasites can't survive in salt water, so this fish is pretty safe. Sadly, you won't have any soy sauce to dip your makeshift sashimi into. You won't starve in the middle of the forest either. Inner bark from pine, aspen, maple, willow, and birch trees are edible. And while it's not as yummy as sushi, it's still okay. Plus, it contains vitamin C. Also, using pine needles, you can make fantastic tea that will warm you on cold winter days. Now on to the bad news. Eating snow is a big no-no. And it's not about the suspiciously yellow type of snow. Snow will neither fill your belly nor quench your thirst. In fact, eating it can lower your body temperature, and your body will also need more water to melt the snow than the amount you will consume, making you even more dehydrated. Right, even if you look for food in your own kitchen, it can still be pretty risky. When making delicious pastries, keep the flour away from the fire because it is a highly flammable substance that can burst into flames in seconds. It is 35 times more flammable than coal, so make sure it's in a safe place. There's one more cooking tip you gotta know. If oil catches fire, don't try to put it out with water, it'll only make it worse. Instead, you should throw baking soda on it if the fire is small. And if it's a bigger one,
use a fire extinguisher. You can also put a lid on the pan. The oxygen will soon run out and the fire can't survive without it. Imagine you're walking near a lake or a pond with your dog, and you see a kangaroo in the middle of the lake. Whatever you do, don't try to help it, and keep your dog on a leash. Kangaroos do this when they feel threatened by a predator. And when the unlucky predator enters the water, the kangaroo can drown the animal. It has been reported that many dogs have been hurt this way, so make sure your pooch and you are safe. Stay on the bank. Hiking is fun, but there are many dangers lurking in the forest. I bet you've seen people on TV telling to suck the venom out if you've been bitten by a snake. But that's a terrible thing to do. The thing is, it can introduce harmful bacteria to the wound. Instead, you should calm down, lie on the ground, adjust your position so that your wound is below your heart, and call emergency services immediately. Or your friends should rush you to the hospital. In emergency situations, you can start a fire using your reading glasses. Align them with the sun and point them at some easily flammable material, like dried grass. Soon, you'll see smoke. If the glasses don't have high magnification, you can add water to the lens to enhance the effect. Never run away from a cougar, and don't make eye contact. Looking the animal straight in the eye signals that you're up for a challenge. Instead, try to make yourself bigger. Spread your arms, puff your chest, and start yelling at the animal. Dangerous insects are everywhere. Before you put on your shoes, give them a good shake because you definitely don't want your toes to meet with a spider or a scorpion. Rattlesnakes are known for getting into sleeping bags on hot summer days. I mean, you can't blame them. Everyone wants to escape the heat. So before you get into one, make sure there are no wiggly creatures inside. Also, a campfire can keep the snake away. You've probably seen movies where bees attack one of the characters, and they jump into the water to get rid of the insects. While it may look plausible, the reality is very different. The bees will simply wait for you to run out of air and resurface. These guys are really smart. If you fall into a frozen lake and can't find your way up, go to the darkest spot in the ice, which is usually the hole you've fallen through. Snow and ice reflect light and are usually much brighter than an opening in the ice. After getting out, don't try to walk. Slide yourself away from the hole like seals do. Swimming is a fun activity, unless you've fallen into a frozen lake. But rip currents can easily ruin your fun too. Should you ever end up in such a situation, start swimming parallel to the shore, and you will be out of the current. To get some rest while swimming, arch your back to stay afloat. Position your hips up in a horizontal position. Relax, no tension. Pull your shoulder blades together and release chest tension. Stay relaxed for optimal performance and don't panic. If you don't know how to swim and you're not ready to shell out money to buy a life jacket, your pants have your back. They can be used as an actual life jacket. Tie them at the openings after filling them with air. Put them around your neck, and you're good to go. Hope your pants are waterproof. Your pants won't help though if you see a drowning person. Your first instinct will be to jump into the water and help them, right? But if you don't have a flotation device, they will grab you and pull you under the water, putting you both at risk. So, the best thing to do is throw them something that floats, or help them get out using a stick or rope. Diving in dark waters can be disorienting, since it might be hard to find a way to the surface. Exhale some air. It's less dense than the water and will always float to the surface. Follow these air bubbles and you'll be safe. In a pinch, you can drink salt water, but first you need to dilute it 4 times because salt water is 4 times saltier than your bodily fluids. To put it simply, you will need 3 glasses of fresh water for 1 cup of seawater. Mix this all together and you can safely drink it. Salt water has many minerals that are good for you, but it can never replace fresh water, so drink it only if you must. You're on a beach and your legs are submerged up to your knees, but suddenly you notice that the water is receding. You should run as fast as possible to the highest point you see, because that can be the sign of an incoming tsunami.
Other signs are ground shaking and loud noises. You're not 100% safe even in your own bed. Imagine you're sleeping in complete darkness, but a strong smell of gas wakes you up. Don't turn on the lights. The spark from a light switch can light up the gas, making the problem bigger than it has to be. Don't use any form of light. Even your phone's flashlight can ignite the gas. Now picture this. A service dog approaches you on the street. You might want to pet it, but you should not do that. Stay still and don't move. Let the handler move the dog. If the handler isn't around and the dog is trying to get your attention, the handler might be in trouble, so follow the dog. You might save someone's life. Never post on social media when you aren't at home. Thieves can use this info to break into your home. This should be obvious, but many people ignore this advice. You can post your pictures of the beautiful beach you visited when you get back home.
If you live in a hot spot for earthquakes, like I do, you may have had these familiar shaking feelings. The ground trembling underneath you, pictures rattling on the walls, your neighbor's dog yapping across the yard. An earthquake is basically tectonic plates moving and grinding against each other. Rub your hands together really fast right now. Things heating up? That's energy. When these plates' energy get released, you and your neighbor's dog feel it on land. Yes, we're all surfing on giant pieces of land floating on hot liquid rock. You're surfing right now while watching this video. Sometimes one slides under another, like reaching in between the couch cushions for that remote that slipped down there. If you're wearing long sleeves, they get rolled up on your arm like a snake shedding its skin. When plate tectonics do this, mountains form. But let's zoom out from your bedroom. Even further. Keep going. There. Earth, the third planet from the Sun. Covered in mountains, canyons, and those familiar continents with oceans stretching between and all around them. But our planet used to have just one single supercontinent, Pangaea, where all the land masses were hugging each other and enjoying the sweet life surrounded by one massive superocean. Africa and Australia were neighbors. The Americas and Asia popped up for a howdy neighbor. But fast forward about 300 million years, and here we are. And there you are, hanging 10 on molten rock as the ground beneath you forms mountains, ridges, volcanoes, and earthquakes. Sounds hardcore, but you don't feel like you're moving, do you? You also don't feel like your body is going highway speeds when you ride in a car. That's physics, and it's a funny thing. Right now, the plate under you is only moving a couple of inches a year, up to 4 when things get super speedy. Per day, that comes to half the width of a strand of hair. So let's speed things up a bit, say 300 feet a day. And me too.
You're sitting in your room enjoying a delicious cup of hot cocoa, scrolling the feed and watching some videos. As you set the mug on the nightstand, you begin to feel dizzy, like the room is spinning. You check your drink and see the liquid inside is swaying like crazy. Uh-oh, now you're swaying. You manage to get up but can't keep your balance. Everything topples over like a tornado in the room. You duck underneath your bed and cover your head. There's a power outage, and now you can't see anything.
There are two things to keep in mind when it comes to earthquakes: magnitude and intensity. Magnitude is the size of the quake. It's just one constant number. Intensity is how much shaking it causes. That number can be different depending on where you're measuring from. The most powerful earthquake ever was in Chile in 1960. Its magnitude measured 9.5 on the Richter scale. Above 7 is considered severe. The quake caused tsunamis all the way to Japan, Hawaii, the Philippines, and even New Zealand. The damage cost millions of dollars in repairs.
In the dark, you can still feel the ground shaking below you. And since the crust cut across 300 feet today, the ground rips open. The landscape where you used to bike around is now sprouting deep earth rocks and minerals. The buildings all around begin to collapse, but luckily, you manage to sneak off and escape into an open space. There isn't any service on your phone either. The cell towers toppled over during the quake, but the ground is still shaking. And with the plates moving so fast, the Earth's interior begins to show its true colors. And that color is red. Red for red hot. You can see the mantle at this point. The Earth, like an onion, is revealing its layers. With magma flowing right in front of you, you'd think you're in a disaster movie. Suddenly, you get a whiff of salty sea air, and now you're standing on the beach. But wait a minute, you don't live by the coast. If an earthquake's strength is measured by magnitude and intensity, this one's a doozy. It probably originated out in the ocean and stretched all the way inland where you are. It caused a tidal wave so big, the coast just came to your landlocked town. Waves of ocean water are gathering near the edges of the city. Farms and rivers are all gone with a single tidal wave. The land that was good for agriculture is no more. And as the ground below you keeps on cutting, it lets in some ocean water between the gaps. It collides with the magma that's rising. Steam shoots up from the ground, and the Earth looks like a giant tea kettle. With the power out and no cell signals, there's no way of communicating with anyone. And that's just the thing with earthquakes. They can show up with hardly any warning.
Unlike earthquakes, tornadoes, and typhoons, with those, we can predict their path and intensity. We can prepare. Even volcanic eruptions give people enough time to evacuate and reach safe ground. But earthquakes are just in a league of their own.
And with all the buildings collapsing around you, you'd be seeing a smokescreen of dust and debris. The air would be unbreathable. Better grab a gas mask. Off in the distance are the mountains you've always enjoyed. You trekked along the trails every other weekend and had some fantastic camping trips along the river. But the earthquake drags across the center of the mountain and creates enough pressure to cut it. Trees start falling over. The mountain becomes a pile of rock and dust. It's not over yet. The shaking ground makes large pieces of land and rock slide down and head towards the town. Some landslides are so massive, they're enough to wipe out entire villages in remote areas. Many come after heavy rain, others come completely unexpected. With the ground opening beneath you, many of the objects on land get swallowed into the pit. Cars, trees, buildings, statues, you name it. You're able to find safe ground, but you can't really know if it's all that safe. All this is happening in your town and places across the globe. But it's about to get even more global.
Plate tectonics are crucial for life on Earth. One of their main duties in a thankless job was maintaining the planet's comfortable, livable temperature. Without landmasses floating around on a layer of liquid rock, there'd be no life on the liveliest planet we know so far. A couple of billion years ago, Earth was just a little ice ball. This was because the sun, much younger back then, was colder than it is today. You'd think the oceans would be frozen and good enough to skate from the Atlantic to the Pacific, but they weren't. And it's all because scientists believe the shifting plates underneath kept the oceans warm and cozy. They did that by creating underwater volcanoes. Besides lava and many gases, they spewed carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which trapped the heat on Earth. As the sun gradually got hotter, rainfall was able to drag the carbon dioxide back to the ground and into the mantle. And this cycle was able to help the Earth maintain its temperature to host us. Gee, how thoughtful. Earth is so unique because of these plate tectonics. No other planet in the solar system can brag of the same, except for Jupiter's frozen moon Europa. It's shown evidence of moving plate tectonics within the core. And even though Venus and Mars have hot interiors, there hasn't been any sign of such activity.
As the ground continues to cut across the land, everything in sight has now descended underground. If the plates were to move 300 feet a day for a year, the entire planet's landscape would go through a total makeover. A bad one. Life as we know would cease to exist, except for maybe microscopic bacteria and a few insects that can survive such harsh conditions. The polar ice caps wouldn't hold any more ice, and volcanoes would continuously be erupting. The planet would just end up looking like a hot fireball of destruction, and maybe even burn up entirely.
Luckily, this is purely a hypothetical thought experiment. So, sit back, relax, and don't worry about the ground moving under your feet. It's taking its sweet time at a safe pace.
Woohoo!
Did you used to make sandcastles at the beach when you were little? The structure had a moat, so you needed to dig deep. While holding a plastic shovel, you probably thought, how deep can I go? Well, this question motivated a group of scientists in the Far East. They have decided to dig the deepest hole in their home country, China. The drilling team's goal is to reach a depth of nearly 33,000 feet. That's about 1 1/10 times as deep as Mount Everest is tall. The location of the borehole is at the edge of the second largest shifting sand desert in the world, Taklamakan Desert. During a single day, air temperatures there can vary over 100 degrees. The drilling rig is impressive on its own. It weighs some 550 tons and is the height of a 20-story building. And it's pretty powerful, too. It can lift the equivalent of 120 adult elephants. These engineers aren't kidding. One of them compared the project to driving a big truck on 2 thin steel cables. That's why they expect the dig to last well over a year. Their ultimate goal is to drill downward through 10 layers of strata. These are horizontal layers of sedimentary rock. Sounds complicated? Just look at any exposed cliff and you'll notice how it has stripes of different colors. These are the strata I'm talking about. If we translate it from Latin to plain English, we'll get things that spread out. Makes sense. Each layer of rock represents a specific geological period. Remember Spielberg's 1993 blockbuster Jurassic Park? That's just one of these geological periods. It ended some 145 million years ago. But in Central Asia, scientists won't travel that far through time. They hope to reach the rock dating back to the Cretaceous. That's the geological period just after the Jurassic. It lasted until some 66 million years ago. This was the time when T-Rex still roamed North America. But why mount such a complicated operation in the first place? A single goal would be a waste of funds. That's why engineers in Central Asia have several objectives. They want to explore the planet's internal structure. This involves the search for natural resources, such as mineral deposits and oil. Another goal is to collect scientific data on earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The information will help researchers better predict these events in the future. So, hardcore science is behind this pioneering project, but it's not the first of its kind. Deep in the Arctic Circle lies the Kola Peninsula. And no, it doesn't have anything to do with the famous beverage company from Atlanta. This Kola is a region of great natural beauty, covered in forests and lakes, and an abandoned scientific research station. Inside this crumbling building, a rusty metal cap sticks out from the concrete. It doesn't look that impressive today, but this is the site of the deepest man-made hole on the planet. It is over 40,000 feet deep. That's deeper than the Mariana Trench, 36,201 feet, the deepest place on Earth. Scientists were drilling it for nearly a quarter of a century. The project started in 1970 and finally shut down in 1995. But if you travel to this region close to Norway, you wouldn't be impressed by the shaft. It is only 9 inches in diameter. It would be impossible to fall down such a narrow opening. And despite the figures, the hole is pretty shallow on a bigger scale. You see, the drill bit went through only a third of the Earth's crust. Let me explain. Remember those layers of strata? Yup, that's what our planet looks like on the inside. The 3 layers are the crust, the mantle, and the core. The crust accounts for only 1% of Earth's mass, and it's some 25 miles thick. But it holds nearly all life in the known universe. The deeper you go, the hotter it gets. At the place where the crust meets the mantle, Moho, temperatures max out at 752 degrees Fahrenheit. Ouch. There are 2 types of Earth's outermost shell, oceanic and continental. The crust is thinner under the ocean floor, so why not drill here? Well, the thinnest part is usually the deepest part of the ocean. That doesn't mean that people haven't tried to drill into the seabed. Americans attempted this off the coast of Mexico in 1961, Project Mojole. Drilling underwater was more expensive than anyone anticipated. A few meters of basalt, the researchers were able to bring up costs some $40 million in today's money. Not worth the effort, literally. The Kola super deep borehole also burned money quickly. And that wasn't the only heat scientists had to face. The temperature at the top depth was a staggering 356 degrees Fahrenheit. That was double what the drilling team expected. Their machinery simply couldn't operate in that heat. At this depth, rocks behaved more like plastic than rock. If they had gone deeper, the stones would have the consistency of oversized caramels. But the drilling team gave their best. They even invented a new type of drill where only the tip rotated. There was also a lubricant to smoothen the process. This simply means they pumped a lot of pressured mud into the hole. Yet, they came short. Have scientists completely given up? Not by a long shot. The Japanese built a ship, Chikyu, 20 years ago to drill through the seabed, and they have invested a hefty sum in the project, $1 billion. The mission's goal was to drill into the Earth's crust where it's the thinnest. Under the ocean floor, it is less than 4 miles thick. If the Japanese team of scientists succeeds, it will be the first time humans recovered in situ mantle rocks. What is that? In situ is a Latin term that simply means in the original place. The only time we get to see what Earth's mantle looks like is during a volcanic eruption. A plume of hot mantle rising to the surface will form a volcano. You know the rest. But where are the Japanese researchers planning to drill? After all, they have a huge ship, so it could be anywhere in Earth's oceans. They've narrowed it down to 3 locations: Costa Rica, Hawaii, or Baja. In cartoons, characters often dig up a hole and end up in another country. The idea is that since our blue planet is round and you dig straight down, you'll end up on the other side of the world. Sounds interesting, but this theory has no grounding in truth, pun intended. Science knows more about outer space than about what's underneath our feet. And digging won't get us far. The temperature at our planet's inner core exceeds 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The best heat-resistant materials humankind has developed, tantalum carbide and hafnium carbide, can withstand around 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Good enough for building spacecraft, but not good enough for traveling to the center of our planet. But will Jules Verne's famous novel, Journey to the Center of the Earth, ever become a reality? For now, we can only imagine. The vessel that would take someone to the center of the Earth would first have to have great insulation. Then it would have to withstand a pressure 4,000 times stronger than at sea level. Let's talk about the finances. The cost of this imaginary mission would be astronomical. The good news is that you could pay it off with what you find underground. At a certain depth, 93 miles, you'll stumble upon diamonds. They form when all that heat and pressure alter the structure of carbon atoms. The final leg of the journey would take you through the Earth's core. The temperature here is the same as on the surface of the sun. And you'd be traveling through molten iron and nickel. But that's not the weirdest fact. The outer core has low gravity. The mass of our planet would be behind you. So the gravitational force would actually pull your vessel backward. Future travelers to the center of the Earth better have a supercharge button. That would be the only way to reach the planet's inner core. Have you ever noticed how insects seem to get bigger in certain parts of the world? Take Australia and the Amazon rainforest, for example. They're notorious for having some of the largest and creepiest crawlies around. What's the deal with these hotspots of insect activity? Warmth plays a part in insect growth, but it's not the only factor at play. You won't get bugs that large out in the desert, for instance, despite the heat. The real secret lies in their access to water. In tropical and subtropical environments, there's usually plenty of moisture to go around, which means a year-round supply of delicious snacks. Speaking of snacks, that's where things get interesting. The warm, wet environment creates the perfect conditions for an all-you-can-eat insect buffet, which allows insects to grow and thrive over time. This is true for rats too. Just look at the giant rodents that live in cities, where they can feast on all kinds of garbage and scraps. For bugs, the perfect gem is usually found near the equator, in places like Central and Southern America, parts of Africa and Asia and Northern Australia. Have a look at this one. It's special not because of its large size. Humans rarely see this insect. It's a wood moth and was spotted at a school in Australia. The school is close to a rainforest. It holds a record for being the heaviest moth in the world. It had a wingspan measuring up to 9 inches. In Australia, there are about 60 species of wood moth. Yet many aren't as big as the giant wood moth. The students get to face many animals on campus, such as bush turkeys, koalas, and snakes. But according to the principal, seeing a wood moth was a brand new thing. When we start talking about insects in Australia, it's also hard not to mention spiders. They are impressively big. Again, it's all thanks to the warm climate and abundance of food sources in the Australian bushlands. Like most cold-blooded animals, spiders tend to grow bigger in warmer places. The Australian climate, especially in the northern and central parts, is hot and humid, making it the perfect environment for spiders to grow and thrive. Spiders are also sensitive to temperature, so warmer climates provide them with longer periods to grow before reproduction. Australia's vast bushlands provide more insects for spiders to prey on, making them bigger and stronger. From the crab spider to the Australian bird-eating spider and the huntsman. Although they may look scary, most of them are not dangerous to humans. Now we can take a deep, relaxing breath. So, how do Australians handle big spiders without going crazy? I mean, we are talking about a country that is home to about 10,000 species of spiders. Australians treat spiders with respect despite the cases of spider bites. They acknowledge that these creatures are not here to scare people. They're an irreplaceable component of the ecosystem. When they face a spider at home, they call the experts if there's no one brave enough to capture the spider and take it outside. Here are some weird-looking animals from Australia. I must admit some look creepy, and some look cool. This one here is a hot pink slug. It has a striking bright pink coloration, which is believed to be an adaptation to their environment. This creature is among the rare and endangered species. You can find it only in a single place, Mount Kapooter National Park. It's near an isolated forest on an old volcano. Insects are part of everyday life in certain parts of this country. A person was mowing the lawn and a surprise was waiting for them. They discovered this 14-inch tall insect. And this person was kind enough to fill the bird bath on a hot day. Then they noticed that birds didn't go near the bath. They wondered why and checked it out. Well, hello there. Next up, we have this giant insect, and it's still alive. Why is it such a shocking thing? Because, it was declared extinct nearly a century ago. I guess it's back from the other side? It's the Lord Howe Island stick insects, aka the tree lobsters. These giant bugs, measuring about 6 inches, used to call this place their home sweet home, but black rats had other plans. These rodents invaded the island, gobbling up everything in their path, including the poor stick insects. By 1920, the bugs were officially declared extinct, but as fate would have it, they made a comeback more than 40 years later on Ball's Pyramid, a volcanic sea stack located 12 miles away. But here's the twist. The new and improved stick insects look slightly different from their ancestors, leaving scientists scratching their heads, wondering if they were the real deal. After some scientific sleuthing and DNA testing, the verdict is in. They're the same species. With less than 1% genetic difference, these plant-eating critters are ready to make a triumphant return to their homeland. We're about to take the creepy crawlies to a whole new level. In Australia, there's a centipede that'll make you want to crawl out of your skin. I must also say these animals are nocturnal too. Can you imagine waking up with one of these 6-inch long centipedes crawling across your foot? Have you ever seen an insect that looks like it came straight out of a science fiction movie? Well, let me introduce you to the Australian walking stick. If we showed you a picture of this creepy crawler, you'd probably think we had some mad Photoshop skills. But no, this stick insect is as real as they come. It's hard to believe such a bizarre-looking creature could actually exist in nature. This just goes to show how incredible and mind-boggling nature can be. Picture this. You're wandering through your garden, minding your own business, when suddenly you walk face first into a sticky web. Before you have a chance to freak out, you see the culprit, a garden orb weaver spider. These nocturnal creatures might look scary with their large, hairy bodies and red-brown to yellow markings, but luckily they're harmless to humans. In fact, having them around can be a good thing, since they help to reduce insect pests like mosquitoes. Their webs are truly a marvel of nature, strong and nearly invisible, with a large capture area for prey. And if you accidentally break their web, don't worry. They'll usually get the hint and move somewhere else. So go ahead and enjoy your garden, but watch out for those sneaky garden orb weavers. Check out this hefty Aussie critter, the burrowing cockroach. Unlike those pesky flying roaches, these fellas are wingless and not considered a nuisance. They've got a vital role to play in the ecosystem, munching on fallen leaves and recycling other organic matter. You might find them chilling out in a cozy burrow. In fact, they're the only known cockroach with a permanent subterranean abode. These crawlies are practically celebrities in Brisbane, where they're even kept as pets. Our next subject is the Hercules moth. This little thing can only be found chillin' in New Guinea and northern Australia. Now let's talk about why the Hercules moth is so impressive. For starters, it's massive. It boasts a wingspan of 11 inches, making it the biggest moth in all of Australia. Not only that, but its wings have a surface area, making it the largest of any insect alive. Talk about impressive. When it comes to appearances, the Hercules moth is mostly golden brown and white, with see-through spots on each of its 4 wing sections. The coloring and patterns don't differ too much between males and females, but the males have longer, skinnier tails on their wings. The thing about these types of animals is that you never know where they'll fly. Will they land on your shoulder or the tree next to you? Have you ever encountered a giant insect? If yes, what did you do? Tell us your story.
You lie down facing the scorching sun in the middle of the desert when suddenly you smell something extremely foul. You try to crawl to the source to see if maybe someone there can help you, but all you see is a large hole in the middle of nowhere. You crawl there and stick your head down the hole. You hear something really faint down there, but it's too dark to see anything. Still, the foul smell tickles your nostrils. You turn away in disgust and stand up to get a better view of it. The hole is roughly 100 feet in diameter, with nothing around it. You've been wandering around the desert for days and just ran out of food and water. But far away, you see what looks like a small hut. You walk there for another couple of hours until you reach the outskirts of a village. A local man riding a camel tells you that you're in the Al-Mara province in Yemen's eastern region, which is quite close to Oman. He immediately takes you to his mud hut, feeds you, and gives you some water. Feeling refreshed and full, you ask the local about the hole in the desert floor. His eyes sink in and his face grows pale. He grabs you by your sleeve in silence, throws you out of his hut, and slams the door shut. You try to knock on his door once more, but he ignores you. Out ahead is the village market, where you could surely get some answers from people. You head over there, and everyone starts staring at you as if you're some kind of threat. They sense something's off about you. You put on your hood and make your way to a merchant. While you purchase some food, you ask the seller about the hole, but he refuses to sell you anything. He even pushes you off to the pathway. You make your way to another vendor and ask about the hole. At first, he's reluctant to tell you anything, but after you buy a few items from his shop, he finally concedes. He takes you to a small inn and seats you down. He tells you to keep your voice low when talking about it. He then orders a beverage for you and begins explaining everything he knows about the hole. Legends have it that the well of Barhut, which is in Hadramaut, is a cursed place, a prison for spirits. He claims that any object that goes near it eventually disappears. The server comes back with 2 refreshing drinks, and the man quickly stops talking. As soon as the server leaves, he resumes telling you about the well. The reason why people were avoiding you when you mentioned the well was because it's believed that it brought bad luck to anyone who was near it. They were even able to feel it through you. The man tells you that he doesn't believe in such superstitions, but you want to find out more. At night, you head back to the well to find out if what he said was true. You sit down next to it and concentrate all your senses. It's quiet, nothing but the desert wind brushing against the sand. You hear something that sounds like a whisper coming from the hole, as if calling you to go inside. You get up from your meditation and walk towards the hole. The sound gets louder, but you still can't make anything of it. You stick your head down the hole to listen while holding your breath, but it just sounds like gibberish. The next day, you get some rope and pikes and wait till nightfall to prepare for the next step, descending down the hole. Nighttime comes again, and you set up the ropes and tie them around a tree. You climb down while holding the rope with one hand and a torch with the other, and scale down. You try to breathe through your mouth, but you start to feel like you need to catch deeper breaths the lower you go. The hole is believed to be around 850 feet deep, but you were only able to go down around 20. You didn't expect it to be that deep. You start climbing back up, but you decide to drop the torch into the hole to see how far it goes. You see the flame getting smaller and smaller as it disappears into the darkness. Maybe the man was right, just village folklore about something they can't explain. Scientists claim that the hole is millions of years old and has practically no ventilation. Even though it's been around for such a long time, it remains as mysterious today as it's always been. You're walking in Siberia, looking out for some reindeer, when suddenly you hear a loud explosion from the distance. All of your reindeer scatter around, and you're too much in a frenzy to collect them. You run to the source of the blast and find a huge crater in an area you just passed through. In August 2020, a massive hole was discovered in Siberia, Russia, being around 100 feet deep and around 65 feet wide. The local residents and researchers were stunned to find it there. This is the 9th hole documented in the region since 2013. You call the local authorities, and a huge team of scientists arrive with weird-looking scientific equipment. They claim this crater is the biggest one they've seen so far. Most of these craters were found by accident when people went on non-scientific outings by helicopter or by hunters and herders. Scientists aren't able to wrap their heads around it, but they knew exactly where to start. Permafrost, the thing that covers 2/3 of the whole country's territory. Scientists believe that by studying the permafrost, which contains certain chemicals, we can find out why these craters are popping out. Samples of the craters contain a lot of chemicals, but most notably, methane. Scientists took plenty of samples of the frozen soil from the ground and the ice. They had to descend down the crater to collect most of them. And within 2 years, these craters end up turning into lakes. According to their studies, the gases, which are mainly made up of methane, accumulate in the upper layers of the permafrost, and they can come both from the deep layers of the earth and those close to the surface. These gases end up getting trapped in the frost as they accumulate, creating enough pressure to burst through the frozen ground. They claim that these giant holes are a result of the growing temperatures, but that's just one theory. They're still not really sure how they could have formed. But because most of these craters form in remote areas of the Arctic and take years to shape, no one really talks about them. You're fast asleep in the city of Fukuoka, Japan. At around 5 a.m., you hear a loud explosion and feel the ground shake. Japan is prone to earthquakes and tsunamis, so you're prepared for the worst. But the ground isn't rumbling and the building isn't shaking anymore. You check the power, and nothing. The whole apartment and neighborhood is completely dark. You look far out from the balcony and see a huge hole in the middle of a 5-lane road. You leave the building and join the crowd gathering outside. The hole is about 65 feet deep, and it swallowed everything around it. The traffic lights, sidewalks, and a bus stop are all gone. Even parts of buildings are destroyed, leaving the support beams still standing. The whole subway system is totally dysfunctional, and about 800 households are experiencing blackouts. Even the airport and subway had a bit of it. The local authorities evacuate the entire area in case more sinkholes or gas explosions occur. A few days later, it's all fixed. It only took the Japanese engineers and contractors 48 hours to fill it up and a week to reopen the road to the public. The explosion might have been caused by some construction on a subway line, but the sinkhole is sinking again. People noticed that the road seemed to decline by about 3 inches in heavy traffic. But with quick maintenance, Japan can fix anything in the fastest way possible.
It was a regular dive in Australia's Great Barrier Reef for underwater photographer Christian Lane. He was taking photos of a group of male manta rays chasing a female one when suddenly he saw something that made him check if his camera strobes had been broken. There was a pink manta ray in his viewfinder. Other underwater beauties of its kind are usually black on top and white underneath. This creature Christian met that day was black on top and pink on the bottom. It turned out the photographer met Inspector Colossal, the only known pink manta ray in the world living in the waters around Lady Elliot Island. It was named after the famous detective from Pink Panther movies. It was calm, looking at the photographer with its huge eyes. It even seemed that it was smiling at his guest, as Christian remembered in an interview. He managed to take 5 good photos of Inspector Colossal in the 30 minutes they spent together. Divers first spotted the unique manta ray in 2015, and it was only seen less than 10 times ever since. First, the scientists thought the secret to this unusual color was in its diet. They took a sample of its skin and found out it was actually a result of a genetic mutation that caused it to express melanin differently. Many fish have it, but it usually turns them into albinos. For a regular sea creature, a combo of black, which blends with dark waters and can't be seen from above, and white, which blends with light, is ideal protection. A color mutation with pink in the picture would make other sea animals more vulnerable to predators. But a manta ray weighing as much as a car and 1.5 times taller than an average basketball player definitely has nothing to be afraid of. These creatures are born rather big and grow fast in the first few years so they can defend themselves. If you were impressed by a manta ray the shade of bubblegum, meet blue bees. These unique Australian inhabitants have turquoise stripes instead of yellow, which makes them look like flying sapphires. Their thin brown wings look like layers of cellophane with engraved patterns. Another unusual thing about them is their lifestyle. The blue-banded bees are singles. They don't move in swarms and don't live in large nests. They prefer settling in small burrows in the soil or crevices in rocks. Blue bees also have a special way of pollination. They sit on the flower, hold it tightly, and shake the whole body to make the flower move quickly and gently. Then the bees stop and collect all the pollen that goes out of the capsule inside the flower. Blue bees work for Australian agriculture, helping with tomatoes, cranberries, eggplants, blueberries, kiwi, and chili peppers. The next unique Australian animal is called the happiest on this planet. A quokka never stops smiling and looks like a live teddy bear. It's a nocturnal creature the size of a cat. It has inherited its appearance from its relative, the kangaroo. It also has a pouch, which serves as a home for its offspring for 6 months. Quokkas have a diet of grass, shrubs, and leaves. When there isn't enough food, they can use stored fat in their tails as a source of energy. They mostly live on Rottnest Island off the coast of Western Australia. Since there's no predators or traffic there, quokkas have nothing to fear and gladly come into contact with humans. It's against the law to touch them, but no one has banned taking selfies. When you look into the eyes of this cutie pie, the only question is, who on earth would call it the Tasmanian devil? Well, it wasn't that friendly to the European settlers who came to Tasmania in the early 19th century. The cutie pie greeted them with frightening growls, high-pitched screeches, and unearthly screams. They had no more doubts about how to name it when they saw its red ears and extra white jaws with sharp teeth. But when it doesn't have to defend itself, its meals, or impress a mate, the creature goes back to its cute appearance. And although these guys are the world's largest surviving carnivorous marsupials, they don't hunt their prey, but eat carrion. They're mostly active at night, but also enjoy some time in the sun, especially in the water, splashing around. Female devils have pouches to carry their offspring, and up to 4 of those fit in at the same time. Our next hero of the day is so unique that the first scientist to describe it thought they were dealing with a hoax. A platypus has a bill and webbed feet like a duck, the tail of a beaver, and the body and fur of an otter. Males also have sharp stingers with venom on the heels of their rear feet, which they can use to defend themselves from enemies. A venomous mammal is something super rare. Platypuses paddle their way through life as they hunt underwater. They can spend up to 2 minutes submerged to smell some food on the bottom. They don't have any teeth, so they use gravel to chew their lunch. Platypuses don't look that graceful as they move on land, but they can run if they really have to. Echidna is another unique Australian natural hybrid. It has porcupine-like spines, a beak much like that of a bird, a pouch like a wombat's, and lays eggs like a reptile. It feeds its offspring on milk, which just oozes out of the skin in the pouch, and the little one enjoys it. Since it has traits of both a mammal and a reptile, it got its name after a creature from Greek mythology, who was half woman and half snake. Echidnas have pretty strong snouts, which they use to break open logs and termite mounds. Their sense of smell is so good, they can smell food and danger. Their limbs are short with shovel-like claws, perfect for digging out food. Echidnas don't like the company of people or other animals, but you can still find them all over Australia, from deserts to rainforests and mountains. They are the country's most widespread native mammal. Echidnas are great swimmers, and they've been spotted crossing rivers. When the weather gets too harsh for them, they burrow into the soil or in hollow logs and burrows left by other animals. This guy, looking like a mix of a koala and a kangaroo, is a tree kangaroo. It doesn't like the company of others and hides among the trees in tropical rainforests of the mountains in Queensland, New Guinea, and nearby islands. They don't build nests and just camp on any branch they find safe. Tree kangaroos are born well prepared for this way of living, with shorter hind limbs, strong arms, and a long tail for balance to leap among the branches. They have broader feet than their ground relatives and padded soles with sharp curved claws to help them grip during climbing. Tree kangaroos are great long-distance jumpers, both between trees and from their tops. All this makes them rather clumsy when they're on the ground. The heavy tail makes them hop funnily, leaning far forward to keep balance. They also have a cool talent for moving their hind limbs independently while walking. They spend around 60% of their lives sleeping. Sounds like a dream. There are at least 12 species of this cutie, with fur colors from golden and red to black and dark brown. Did you just hear the chainsaw sound? There must be a lyrebird nearby. Those guys have the superpower of copying sounds from their surroundings. With the help of some complex muscles in its syrinx, a lyrebird can mimic camera shutters, different tools, other birds, and reportedly even human speech. It takes them up to 1 year to master this talent, and then they can use it to fool their rivals. Lyrebirds mostly hang out close to the ground and rarely fly. They got their name after the shape of their beautiful tail.